Heavenly Father, today we put on the full armor to protect us against attack. We put on the belt of truth to protect against lies and deception. We put on the breastplate of righteousness to protect our hearts from the temptations. We put the gospel of peace on our feet to walk in your light, peace, and freedom with the Holy Spirit. We rebuke anxious thoughts. We take up your shield of faith for protection to block and destroy all the darts and threats thrown at us by the enemy. We put on the helmet of salvation to cover our minds and thoughts, reminding us that we are children of a mighty King. We are forgiven, set free, saved by the blood of Jesus. We take up the sword of the Spirit, your living word, that has the power to demolish strongholds and is sharper than any double-edged sword. We come to you, Lord, in prayer daily. In Jesus' mighty name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
What's up, you guys? Welcome to The Imagination. I'm your host, Emma, and today I'm honored to introduce you all to child sexual abuse and sex industry survivor, mother, wife, multi-dimensional transformational storyteller, former gifted student, metaphysical practitioner and trauma recovery expert, intuitive healer, spiritual counselor, transformational life coach, and an absolute inspiration, Lynn Navi. Katie experienced trauma in her very young and formative years and was extremely misunderstood as a child due to her extrasensory perceptions and lack of words or concepts for the things she tried to explain that she knew or could see. Paranormal experiences were very normal for her, and in turn, she developed a fascination from a very young age for supernatural phenomena. In school, Katie advanced into being placed into the gifted and talented education or GATE programs that you guys are familiar with, and was selected for leadership conferences and going away to represent her school at leadership conferences and retreats to help her develop her writing and speaking. She was also part of Odyssey of the Mind and youth ministry. As she got older, Katie would internally battle the inner knowing of her intuition versus the strict path her parents expected of her as the daughter of a military father, and eventually she settled on working in the medical field. It was after this decision that she would experience a series of events that would begin to push her into the realms of discovering MK Ultra and questioning the Western medicine model. In 2015, Katie became intertwined in the sex industry after she felt a part of her take over to lead her on a mission she didn't realize would later become investigative work. As a survivor of child sexual abuse, she developed a greater understanding of the darkness within others, with an intrinsic understanding of what motivated divergent behavior. Katie then began to realize, while she was in this world, that she had a few different handlers guiding her and grooming her along the way. In 2016, she had a spiritual awakening that would be the catalyst to her path to recovery, where she would eventually decide to take extreme ownership of her life. She learned how to unpack all the things that she experienced in a safe container with another person and transform that into a different perspective about who she is today. One thing that stood out to her in her recovery was the storytelling of others. Katie realized how valuable storytelling was and how each person's story was a piece of something that she had living within her that needed to be expressed or seen. These stories saved her life and granted her sanity that could never be found in a pill bottle. As Katie heard people tell their stories and she began to tell her own, she began to drop the heavy rock she had been carrying for so long. Today, Katie is a transformational coach and helps people tell their stories in order to heal the past and create a new empowering narrative for themselves. She practices the art of transformational storytelling and works with clients in sharing their experience, strength, and hope so that they can be the medicine for someone else. And this, ladies and gentlemen, is what we call turning pain into purpose. I relate to Katie in so many ways and love how her experiences in healing led her to take what she learned in that healing so she could teach others. This is what I believe to be a massive purpose for all survivors, and Katie's story ended her right where mine ended me, in understanding the power of testimony. After all the women Katie has devoted her life to healing through transformative storytelling, it is my honor to have Katie on The Imagination to finally share her amazing testimony for the very first time on a long format interview. Katie is a hero to me in so many ways, and her selfless nature to help others, I have a deep admiration for. I want to just give a couple quick reminders and updates before introducing today's guest. If you guys want to get in contact with me or share any information privately with me, You can email me at imagineabetterworld2020@gmail.com. And I would also love your support on Substack, where I've taken up investigative journalism as an outlet for me to share about my podcast, the guests, and my advocacy work. And you can subscribe to me there at www.emmacatherine.substack.com. I'm going to have all my links in the show notes, you guys, and I appreciate you guys so much and can't thank you enough for making the imagination the safest place on the internet for survivor and whistleblower disclosures. So you guys, without further ado, please help me in welcoming today's guest of honor, survivor and overcomer, voice for the voiceless, anti-child abuse advocate, social media content creator, coach, educator, poet, and someone I'm honored to call my new friend, the one, the only, Katie Lynn Navi. Katie, thank you so much for being here with me today.
Oh, thank you so much for having me, Emma. What a great introduction. Geez, thank you.
Oh my gosh, you're welcome. So I just want to preface this quick. I met you actually on TikTok. You had posted an incredible video about GATE that got a lot of attention. And as someone who's covered that on the podcast, I thought it was so cool to see other people talking about it. So we started engaging and talking and obviously led to a podcast. But I just want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for bringing awareness to some of this stuff. It's not easy to talk about, and you do it in such a down to earth way. And I know that we'll talk about your social media and kind of what led you to understanding all of this a little bit later in the interview. But for people listening, Katie sent me this incredible poem with some information about herself. And Katie, I wanted to see if you would mind opening up the show with this poem before we dive into your incredible story.
Sure. Okay. This poem was written in 2016 with a collective of people I was in a group with at the time, and it's called Renewed. Together, we form the fragmented pieces of glass in this human mosaic. Fragmented suggests once whole, for either we or I am tangent within a collective soul. I scramble and I scrounge the whole world over to find the pieces all shattered apart, and one by one to structure my future with the journey in mind I can finally start. I'm thinking I'm broken, but I'll still pick up the pieces. We can stay locked in chains, but it's the music that frees us. We can take the pieces to the flame to reshape our lives again. Hold me, take me, move me, shake me, as I try to wake from this nightmare of disconnect. Outwardly, I see no harmony, but help me go deep inside within my inner eye, where we all fly together as one to be free, one conscience. I try to find the reason, and yes, I'm lost in feeling, as I try to hide these demons and wonder why they're so pleasing. I just keep trying at whatever the cost. I just keep trying to keep from getting lost. The many broken pieces come together forever to shine anew. Cracks and scars simply add to the story. They don't show where I failed. They just show where I grew. Love and war collide, and peace will be renewed.
Oh my gosh, I'm muted. Okay. I love that. Thank you so much. I wanted you to read it because it shows your heart and like how it's intended to be read through your emotions and your words. And it was even better than I thought it was going to be. I loved that poem whenever you sent it to me, and especially that last part about the scars and the wounds and how essentially they show sort of, the triumph in the story. They're not something that we should look at as a failure or something, that we should have shame for. Like that's like a battle scar, essentially. And I loved that you really showcased that in this poem. That poem reminds me of your life, honestly, how it started and how it ended. And you did this. This was the collective of people who created this.
So, on my journey of recovery, we're kind of going like we're gonna time travel, I think, in this storytelling day. When I was getting recovery, I was taken to many different places, hospitals, like rehabs, deprogramming centers, like you name it. I had this like feeling to like get the stories of others. Like I just felt like that was something I needed to do, and so I was compelled to like create group like thought, like collective poems with other people. So I started writing this line I wrote: together we form the fragmented pieces of glass in this human mosaic. Fragment suggests one's whole, for I or we are tangent, a collective soul. And that meant like we're together in this storytelling. Like it's not just my story experience. So I believed that if I could, the people around me, if I could just get them to like add a line and just continue the poem, we could have like it was sort of like a microscopic representation of like the macro of who we are. And like, so the people that I met when I was in Palm Desert, we would meet 2 days, we'd meet for 2 hours once a week and we'd make up a song together. And we sat there and like I'd pass a paper around after I'd start a poem. I'd ask each person in the room to add a line as they passed the paper around. And that's how this poem actually was born. It was not just my words, it's the words of about 11 different people that were participating in this.
Oh
So
my gosh, that is so special.
it's a collective message.
I love that, and I mean, it's just gonna continue spreading. I love that it was kind of a
Yeah.
group effort that made it, and it's always amazing whenever you get people together, like, when we can put aside our differences and just kind of focus on, like, what do we all want? Like, at the end of the day, we
Mhm.
all find, like, we all want the same thing, and you proved that, like, you were able to get 11 totally different people together, and, like, you all collectively came together for the same exact message, and it turned out amazing.
Yeah. And I kind of feel like that's what we're doing like today in real time is like each of us are giving a piece of ourself, a piece of our story, and it's one bigger story.
Yes. And I'm
Yeah.
so thrilled to add your story as a puzzle piece to the greater mosaic of the collective because I think I really admire your work being able to shoulder other people's testimonies, especially since you have such a heavy one yourself in a lot of ways. But in other ways, you just have such a beautiful and incredible story of coming to the light after so much darkness. So I wanted to share and sort of introduce you from the start of your story to my audience because I know this is your first time sort of speaking out about this in whole. And although the work that you're doing today is incredible, I want to share with people how you got to where you are because that at the end of the day is what the most inspiring thing is whenever you can see somebody in so much darkness be able to come out and be such a beam of light for people. So if it's okay with you, let's time travel again. Let's
Hmm.
go back to either when you were born or else if you want to share if there's any important history about your family before birth. But let's sort of paint the picture of your childhood and because you were, I feel like you were a special child from the get-go with all this intuitive this high level thinking from such a young age and just having all of these really mature revelations at a time when most kids are watching Disney movies and playing, you're having like paranormal experiences and like exploring that. So let's go dive into your story and go back in time and start from the beginning.
Okay. So I'll give a little brief overview of the family history I know. And this is kind of maybe relevant or not relevant, but it's an interesting anomaly. My parents both they met in Ohio. They were raised in this small town in Ohio. And before that, my father was actually born in Washington, D.C., and he's a twin. And his father was actually his biological father was from Caracas, Venezuela, I believe. And he came to DC, and I don't know like really much about him, if he was like what he was a part of or not a part of, because my dad's biological father left his life in like junior high, and then he was adopted by another man who changed my dad's last name, and my dad ended up losing his first last name and changing over to being somebody else's child essentially. My mother has a similar storyline in the sense that like her biological father, he left her life when she was a toddler, I believe, and then her mom remarried another man and took his last name. But here's the interesting part about the story is that my father's biological last name was Abraham. My mom's biological last name was Lincoln. And that's just a weird thing, like to think about like how to like family lines like connect like that. And then they're both like got different dads and different names. And so I just always wondered if there's significance to the Abraham Lincoln thing, but I just thought it was weird. That was their background. My dad was in the Navy. He left like, so what I do know, and I don't want to give too much of my dad's story, like I have respect for him, but like I do know he had a hard upbringing. Um, he was, in my understanding of stories that I've been told, like he was experienced some abuse. Like I heard like a lot of different people tell like similar stories about being like made to live in a basement and like things like that. It seems like a common core with people who've experienced like trauma or trauma-based programming. My dad was a twin as well, and he just, was somebody of faith. And I think my father had told me he was always like drawn to the metaphysical stuff too as a child, but like he was afraid of it because of, I think, a lot of the religious stuff, like Christianity. And there's like a conflict between like exploring that side of yourself and like, my dad just like shut it down. He was like, no, at a certain age, he didn't want to go there. So, um, he went into the Navy to try to create like a better life for everybody because he felt like he wasn't going to be able to like get out of where they were. And when he was in the Navy, I'm told like he was hand selected for like a special mission during the Cold War. And um and my mom explained it to me like he was chosen because of his integrity and his pattern recognition. Like my dad's really smart. And so I know that a little bit about him. He was on the USS Archie, which has now been like the most decorated naval ship and it's retired. Um, but that was his time in the Navy. He came out here to California and brought it, like that's where I was born. I wasn't raised in Ohio. I was born on the central, actually I was born in Fairfield, which is Cavill, California. But my parents raised me on the central coast of California. Um, that said, my mom's a nurse, and she was like a nurse who developed a lot of programs on the Central Coast. She was like instrumental in developing the hospice and palliative care program there. She also created a program for troubled youth called like the Angels Camp program, and she did the healthcare component to that program as well, which was like on a naval base. Excuse me, not a naval base. It was the Army base, I believe, in San Luis Obispo County. And so my parents were always like really productive and doers and like, like I saw their careers just, they were people who worked really hard and gave a lot of service. And I felt like they were not, they were always like kind of like beat down by like their superiors in some way. Like they were the hardworking grunts in some ways. And I watched them just be depleted over the years too by some of the stuff that they experienced in their careers. So as much as I respect the path that they took, I also knew like I didn't want to be that way. Like I didn't want to end up feeling like life was so hard. And like it was just a lot of so anyways, my upbringing was really positive for the most part in the sense that like I was given a really privileged life where I had like never wanted for anything. My parents put me in like dance and music and like they gave us sports. Every opportunity to basically be a success was put in my lap. But it felt like a lot of pressure as well. Like I was like two different people. One person that was like a performer and another that was like an introvert that just felt very sensitive and wanted to like hide myself. So I had like two different people operating within me growing up, and that manifested itself differently when I got older. But do you want to like, I could probably like deviate in a lot of places. Do you want to ask me any particular question about my upbringing?
Sure.
Yeah,
As much as you're comfortable, you don't have to go into any detail you're not,
yeah,
but I know that the abuse that you had was at a very young age, I believe under
yeah,
7. Do you know
yeah,
approximately when that started or and who was that
yeah.
from?
So, like I said, my parents were both really busy with their jobs, and they were trying to just like support us growing up, my sister and I. So we were in a lot of different babysitters environments, like a lot of different childcare settings growing up. I always felt really insecure because like of that, like I never felt like I had a safe like environment, even though I was raised in a really good home, my home life, like my parents didn't do anything, like they tried to give us everything that they could, but like we were we were in the care at a young age of a lot of strangers that were people like my parents thought they knew from the church or somewhere else. And my abuse took place like in a couple different childcare settings. The one that like had the most significant impact on me was when I was like 6 or 7, and I was, starting to like show weird behavior when my parents would drive by this stretch of highway, like where the babysitter's house was. I would always like duck in the car and like hide myself. And I'd say, bad house, bad house. And I'd like say that over and over. My mom and dad were like, what is going on? And I'd be like, that's the bad house. And so eventually, like, I started manifesting different behaviors that showed like signs of sexual abuse or possible sexual abuse, like, uh, like the standard stuff, like I don't know if I was like wetting the bed or if I was just like acting weird, but I ended up going to a psychologist, seeing a child psychologist around age 7, and like somehow like a memory unlocked one night, and I told my mom everything, and we got on like the phone with the psychologist, and then I had to talk to like a detective and like replay what I remembered. And like honestly, I don't know how much I told or what I like actually experienced except for what I remember now, because that memory is like there's like my brain won't unlock it all. There's a lot of black patches of memory. What I do remember is like I had a female babysitter, and I remember her taking me to a garage and putting me on like this bed or mattress and telling me like she had to change my diaper. And I remember being like, I don't wear diapers. Like, I'm too old for diapers. Like, just thinking like something was weird about that. And I just remember like laying down and like turning my head to the side and seeing a man like dressed up in like Harley leathers, around me. And then I don't remember anything else, like completely like blackout. Um, and then like I just think that the trauma of the experience isn't even really as bad as the trauma of living with shame of the experience. And that's like kind of for me at a very young age, I felt very ashamed of myself. I felt uncomfortable with my body. I was afraid. I remember like the detective that I had to talk to, his son went to school with me, and we were in the same class. And I was like a kid thinking, I'm so worried that this guy's going to go home and tell his son about me. And I was like worried about what other people thought about me, like having to go to all these doctors and just like relive trauma, being like examined. All of it like just made me feel really insecure in my body and felt really small as a person. I started to like display a lot of divergent behavior in elementary school, like around first grade. And it was like I had like two different people in me, one that was really confident and like very like socially what's like socially adept, and then another that was completely like someone else. Like I was like I the best way to describe it is like I was a kid that knew the answers in class, and I'd raise my hand, and then as soon as the teacher would look at me, I'd put it down and I'd like duck because I didn't want to be seen. So there's a lot of that going on. I got in trouble for weird things that I didn't think I was doing wrong. Like I remember getting up from class and like going into other kids' classrooms and being like, "Hey, everybody, we're watching Reading Rainbow in our room. Come on, join us." So I would like bring, I got in trouble for stuff like that. Like, um,
That's cute.
and, and I remember thinking like I was doing a thing. Like all the time when I got in trouble for stuff, I remember being like so heartbroken because I thought I was doing something good. And then it was like a negative. It was like you're a troublemaker. And I'm like, I didn't know that. Like, so like one of my babysitters, I had a lot of like religious abuse too. One of them was like kind of mentally ill and she was religious. And I remember her like, threatening to beat me with a brush and calling me a liar. And this was also around the same age, and said like liars go to hell, and gave me like this book of like, it looked like Dante's Inferno, like pictures of people in like hell, and was like, this is where liars go. And just like being forced to sit there and stare at these pictures. And just thinking like as a child, being like, I don't know what I did wrong. Like I actually don't know what I did wrong. And so a lot of that um had a really heavy like injury to my consciousness as a child. And when you start out that way and you have like these low self-esteem things happen, you're kind of like a magnet. It like sends out a frequency, like a beacon of like, hey, I'm a target now. I'm a victim. I'm sending out victim signals to the universe. I don't know what I'm doing, but I did. And then I became like a target of bullying. I was, often like I just attracted weird situations. Like it felt like all the kids around me that I knew were also like hypersexual. And so like a lot of my sexuality was like distorted, even starting like at a young age in elementary school. Like I felt like all the children that I was around were also like sexually abused, or they had like weird sexual trauma as well, because I want to say like everyone I knew was a pervert in elementary school and junior high.
Oh
Um,
gosh. Oh, that's so sad. And
yeah.
I feel like you brought up a good point where you felt so misunderstood in your intentions. Like you would do things like invite people over to watch the film or the show that
Yeah.
was going on in your classroom where the teachers are like, what are you doing? Like they have their own class, you were trying to just like do something good. And I feel like that started at a much earlier age even than going to school. And I'd love to back up a little bit before we move forward and for you to talk about when did you first start experiencing, I guess, sort of this high level thinking, this spiritual connection, these sort of paranormal experiences or mystical experiences. When did that start in childhood? Because I feel like that was a really big part of your childhood all through school. And obviously it leads into, why you were sought out for gate and stuff like that too.
Okay, yeah. So probably like, most of my life I have been channeling in writing or poetry. At that age, 7, I was actually honored for like a poem I wrote, which I at the time I didn't realize I was channeling because I was writing from a perspective of an 86-year-old woman. And when I was 7 years old, and I wrote this poem called A Magic Night, and it went and won a district contest, and I was published. So I was kind of like put on the map at like 7 years old, like this kid's like channeling. Uh, and then like I started having a lot of supernatural, like I don't want to say it was like demonic attacks, but at the time being raised Christian, I perceived this as like a demonic attack where I was like every time I would be like put through some sort of emotional stress where I was like really deeply like depleted energetically, or I'd be crying like a lot and alone, I felt like something would like come in to my room and like try to get into my body. Like it was a very physical, visceral experience of like this energy trying to like get into me, like a physical being entity. I felt like I was being like something was trying to take over my body. I couldn't move, I couldn't speak, I couldn't scream, but I was fully conscious and awake and I could see, but it was like very scary for me. And I remember when that happened, it started happening. I remember like the only thing I could do is like, focus on my concept of what Jesus was at the time and like hold that in and like cry out to like God or to Jesus, like to help me. And then this thing would just like release, it would push off of me and like go away. But this would happen a lot. It happened so frequently that eventually I got like I knew how to manage it. But like when it started happening, I was a little kid and I remember telling my mom and dad, like, this is happening, and they didn't know what to make of it. And they were like, well, I don't know. Like that's how they perceived it. Like you must not be saved if you have demonic encounters coming to you because you're not covered in the blood of Christ. Like I don't think that's what they really meant, but that's the way I felt by their response to me. So like I remember starting to have like the ability to like see things like the I saw the world and with two different lenses, and I knew that like what I could see was different than what others could see. So I drew a Venn diagram for my mom at a young age, like two overlapping circles. And I said, Mom, I have two brains. And I said, this brain is what you see and everyone else sees. And then this one is what no one like you guys can't see. Like you see all the stuff that you can't see with this brain. And I was trying to show them like there's like two basically like I was multidimensional as a kid, but I didn't know how to express that. And I was trying to like show them visually what that meant. And I think like I was perceived as having mental illness or like some kind of bipolarity because I way I tried to express myself and communicate wasn't really well understood. And I also had like trauma. So everybody's like, of course she's mentally ill. Like she's had trauma. Um, but that wasn't something that like I that really shut me down actually to not be able to express myself and be received in a way that felt like safe. Uh I think I like started shutting myself down, and that part of me like that was intuitive and that could see things. I told my mom and dad like when I was a kid, I said I feel like there's a tug of war game for my soul. I said those exact words because I didn't know how to describe it. I knew the game tug of war because we played that in PE. So I said, I feel like there's a tug of war game for my soul, and both sides want me. And I told them that, and I knew like intuitively as a child, like I was here to do something really important, but I just didn't know what that was. But I felt like intrinsically, like whatever I'm going to do is going to tip the scales one way or the other for humanity. And I know that sounds grandiose, like, but I really, as a kid, thought like I had this knowing I was going to do something that was going to either polarize one way or the other, and it was going to have some sort of like impact on more people. And so it felt like I had a heavy crown to wear actually since I was a kid. Like I just knew, but I didn't know exactly how it would play out. So that, is a little bit about like how I started developing intuitively. I started seeing things too, like angels and like whatever my concept of angels was then. And then as I got older, like I started having dreams, like a lot of dreams where extraterrestrial type things were happening in my dreams. And so it was like a blur between what's real and what's a dream. And, so anyways, but yeah, that's kind of like where the intuitive stuff started. It was in the writing, the poetry, and in the like spiritual phenomena that I was experiencing. Demonic attacks. I don't know what they were.
It feels like you were very misunderstood throughout your childhood just because, like you said, you didn't really have the vocabulary to express yourself. And you were around a lot of adults that sort of, and not in a malicious way, but obviously with school. And if you had more of like a stricter upbringing or had parents that had less creative jobs and were more logical, being around a creative child can be a challenge in a sense of trying to understand the difference between that. And it seems like you were around a lot of very logical adults, and you were using the complete opposite side of your brain a lot of times and like wanting to express that, and we're sort of told to be logical just because people didn't really understand what you were trying to do. And I think that's really fascinating that you still kept trying to find ways to express it, and you had all of these really interesting revelations and downloads and realizations and actualizations about our world at such a young age. I feel like some of the lessons that you're explaining, a lot of people don't even figure out as adults, and here you are, this young child, wanting to invite people into their classroom out of like this love, and while everybody else is sitting down and obeying, you're the one up, like trying to corral people together and bring everybody together. And I think it's absolutely beautiful. But unfortunately, I think too, you were around people who sort of uh maybe had intentions of exploiting those in some way. When did you start being recognized as being gifted after these, I guess, behaviors were manifesting as maybe misbehavior, mental illness? When did they start being recognized as gifts, and when did the gifted program start in your life?
Well, I asked my mom about this recently because I was trying to like put my facts together. And I remember at a very young age, I don't know if this was gate, but I was like it was during the same time I was experiencing the trauma, like 7 years old. I was held back. Let me just say this, I was held back in first grade. I was kept for a second time in first grade because they said that I was developmentally young, which is like basically you're like socially immature for your age, or like you're not like I what my mom said, like I had poor fine motor skills and stuff, but I'm like I don't remember that, but okay, like so they like said a bunch of stuff like that made me look like I would need another year in first grade, and that actually like was devastating to me because it was another blow to my self-esteem as a kid, because all the other kids were like, did you fail the first grade? And like that's how kids are, or at least they were back in elementary school. They were like kind of a little harsher. People didn't have like compassion today, and they just thought I was like a weird kid. um but while I was in my second year of first grade, I had the same teacher too, like twice, which is interesting. Like she was a trip. Miss Turner, she was a hippie, like total hippie teacher, like had us, we didn't have like a normal classroom. It was no desks. We sat in like bleachers and circles, and we always would have like group conversations. So it was never like there was never a desk in there. And her room was like just one big like imagination creation type setting. We had like an aquarium, we had like a nature table, we had all this, like she had a pretty large classroom. um and she did a lot of like trying to like cultivate our art, like I guess like our self-expression. I felt like at a young age, I was really being like groomed to express myself, which was challenging, being that I came from like just all this trauma. I'm like two different people. One person wants to hide, and one that's being, you know, used to like be outgoing and expressive. I had like this introvert extrovert thing going on. But she would sing songs like with a guitar, and we'd sing a lot of like songs from the 60s and stuff, like about like peace and let's give peace a chance. And there was like a lot of like early programming of like we're here to like bring peace on earth. um but she was also mentally ill, and now looking back, like I can kind of see that she was like mentally ill herself a little bit, like had sudden mood swings as a teacher, would be like super cool and then be like hard on me, like harsh. So that was like weird. But I don't know if this started in first grade or third grade when I was officially in gate. I remember being taken out of class to go to like a trailer on the back of the campus. It was like a mobile, like one of those mobile trailer rooms. And it was like on the very back of the campus. And there were like no light coming in. Like they had windows covered with like pink, I want to say it was like pink paper or something on the windows, like covering the windows. And inside the room, all I remember is like it was just like felt like another deskless like creation center where we were just all sitting together on a carpet. And the teacher, I just remember like she was trying to provoke us to express ourselves in music and in like poetry. And there's a lot of like self-expression and a lot of like writing, creative writing, music, poetry. Those things were like just always enforced, and everywhere I went was like, right, you're a writer, you're a performer. And so I had a lot of like performative training, I want to say, like learning how to like just be an influencer at a young age. And that was like where it began. I did Odyssey of the Mind in sixth grade. I remember that so vaguely. Like the memories are so weird how they're like choppy, because you have like certain memories and then you're like, what the heck, as you go back. So what I remember in Odyssey of the Mind is like a group of us at this kid's house, and like in my group, and we had to put together a skit, but it was like a business proposal too. Like we were problem solving something, and we had certain materials that we were allowed to use. and we had to do this acting portion of it too. And that's the part I remember. I don't remember any of the science that we did. I don't remember any of like the actual like mathematical parts of it. I just remember the performative part. And we were acting out like a skit with the Wizard of Oz, like Wizard of Oz characters. And we all each had to play like a role. And I was the scarecrow. I was the scarecrow. And there was like a boy who was playing Dorothy, which like is weird now, like in hindsight, like knowing the whole gender inversion thing that's going on. But like, so the boy was playing Dorothy, and they had him dressed in drag, and he was a sixth grade kid. And I remember like it feels like I was there but not there for the whole thing. Like I just remember being there performing, but I don't actually consciously know what we did or what we were saying. I just know we did this thing and we put on this show, and that's about it.
Wow, that's really fascinating, and thank you for sharing. That's been, like, sort of a revelatory subject on this podcast that I think gets
Yeah.
overlooked in this conversation, and I actually wanted to, before we move on, with your story, I wanted to skip to the present day. That's how I found you, was a post about gait, and I wanted to ask you about anything interesting that you've learned from that, because essentially you put out a TikTok that spoke about gait, and you brought up some points about, certain things that it seems like people that went through these programs have in common. And you sort of put out a call to action of like, hey, have any of you guys been through this? What are your experiences? And that post like really it got a pretty good reach, and you got a ton of comments. So I wanted to see,
Yeah.
what have you learned from gait since your own exploration, from your own story, and then putting that post out.
Yeah, well, I've been trying to like connect the dots to why I've been so like intrinsically connected to MK Ultra, like why this has been a part of like my consciousness, my investigative work that I've done. And I'm just like, what is the like, where's the lines here? Like I was trying to figure it out. And then something like I get these like intuitive hits where I think about something and then I just like think about it and I look something up and then it feels as almost as if like information is just fed to me sometimes when I get an idea about it. And so like I don't have to look very hard to find answers. So like I thought about like the GATE program and I just was like, for some reason I just decided to Google GATE program CIA. Like I just put those two things together in my head. And then all this stuff showed up and I'm like, whoa, what the heck? Like, and then like everything started to make sense. And I started to integrate like my backstory and my front story and my in the middle story and see there's like a greater connection to the GATE program. And from what I understand, from what I got in my research, is that this has to do with like it grew from MK Ultra, which had to do with like the needs for the country. Like in a nutshell, the Tavistock Institute was actually like working in conjunction with some alphabet agencies to create like this in the education U.S. education program. One of the reasons they were looking for like I believe that, I mean, allegedly, we're just going to say allegedly, this has been spoken of on a lot of different forums, and there's articles that are written. So I'm just going to actually pull this up really quick so I can, uh,
And while you're doing that, I wanna comment
yeah.
too. I had tried to send you the gate episode that's on my podcast, and it, like, would not show up for you, which was freaking crazy.
Yeah, it was wild. It was like it skipped that one. Like I saw this, the one before and the one after, but that one in the middle wasn't present. I was like, wow, that's so weird. Maybe they don't want me to see it right now. So I could just, I say they because I don't know. Like, you know, we don't know a
We
lot of
don't.
things.
Yeah. Yeah.
So what I got from the research I did from the GATE program, and this is all just alleged, this is like hypothetical, this is not proven factually yet, but if it resonates, then take it as you will. But this is what I understand. Basically, like the talented and gifted education program was a glowing psyop run by the Tavistock Institute based on research done after World War II, where the US realized it was falling behind Russia and China in identifying gifted individuals. And I'd like to just take a moment to pause on that. what I know from my own research and understanding of MK Ultra, as well as like a lot of this had to do with after World War II, we we were like shocked to find out some of our soldiers came back and they had been under like a mind control we had never known or seen before. We saw that like other countries had accessed the subconscious mind in ways that we hadn't. And I have like a little like, a conspiracy theory of my own that perhaps during space race to the moon, they were actually on a different space race to the unconscious mind. And that this was like sort of like what the public was seeing as, like Russia and China and US are all in the space race to the moon. But in my personal opinion, my humble conspiracy tinfoil opinion, I believe that this was coherent with like them trying to race to beat one another at mind control and accessing the subconscious mind. Because we know in like esoteric teachings, the moon represents the subconscious mind. It's like our unconscious. And this was like at the same time very heavily being done. Like there is a lot of research experimentation. We brought over the doctors, like some of the doctors from the Nazi party. We quietly brought them over here and asked them to help teach us what they were doing when they were like working on people in concentration camps and stuff, because the research they had was completely different than what we had over here. So like how that connects to the GATE program today is there's actually like an article called Tracing the Relationship Between the Gifted Education and Needs of the Country. The modern day talented and gifted programs are basically outgrowths of the research that came from MK Ultra. And with some people on these 4chan forums suggesting that these programs had a secondary objective, which was to the identification and classification of individuals based on their personality types. So the idea is certain kids, smart but obedient ones, were selected for prominence in government, industry, or academia roles, whereas other kids, the smart but anti-authoritarian ones, are being singled out for other purposes, which is some nebulous idea that they will play a role in the crash of civilization and the rebuilding after the crash. And as I saw that, and I read that, I was like, that totally like lands with me. That feels like right. I found in the comments like this, I didn't even say any of this in my first post. I was just like, hey guys, like, has anyone ever been in part of GATE? Do you remember being in a place with no windows? Like I just dripped a few little things. And I was alarmed at how many people were activated by that. Like the light went on and they were like awake all of a sudden, like hypnosis is over. And like all these people started sharing their memories, thousands of people. And there were so many patterns that I recognized in their sharing. I was like, okay, we have a real big, like, this idea that these kids were maybe like separated from things. That is a very, 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 strong thing to consider now based off of the research I have. Like, a lot of people that were in GATE that were like not totally like messed up, I guess, from it or what they experienced in their upbringing. So I don't want to say GATE caused anything, but like maybe it's just like the pattern of the individual in what they experienced. A lot of them are either like in some sort of like successful roles like industry, academia, those people are like working right now for government roles or they don't even know they are. And then there's people that are like the other side, I think the anti-authoritarian kids, those ones I've noticed have had significant patterns of substance abuse and trauma and a lack of feeling of purpose. And so it's like we have two different like categories of kids for real, like that are adults today. Some of them that are just living their lives doing the thing, upholding the systems that we're in. They're good people, like healthcare professionals, teachers, lawyers, doctors, people who work for DC, but then they're just not aware. And then there's like this other group that's fully aware, but they're actually like, their lives are not as glamorous. They've lived hard lives. They've been in really challenging situations. A lot of them suffer with addiction and substance abuse, narcissistic abuse, you name it. Like So there is like a definite dichotomy between the gate kids today.
Did you see any similarities pop up? I know you had mentioned in your experience that the windows were covered. Did you see any
Mhm.
significances of people who were like, "Oh my gosh, like this happened," and you saw a ton of people had these like just consistent things happen to them while they were in there?
Yeah, a lot of them. It's really interesting how many people remember but don't remember stuff. Like, so a lot of people will say, "I remember this." Like the consistency, like everyone remembers the fluoride swishes, the pink drinks, the pink tablets, candies, whatever they were. Some kids have said like they remember getting them before they went into class and after. Some kids, like, that's a very common memory that they remember. The hearing tests that we did, like the frequencies, like raise your hand if you hear the beep. The cards, like what do they call those, ink blot cards? And a lot of kids said they remember ESP tests, like where people wanted them to like say what's on the other side of this card, checking their like third eye, I guess, to see if they're able to uh, see things or remote view things. But not everybody remembers that. There's such a variety pack too. Like there are certain things that are very interesting that are similar, and then there's like stories where people were wide awake and they remember and they didn't take to hypnosis. So I had like a lot of people reach out to me that were like, "Yeah, I remember seeing the whole class get hypnotized, but I didn't. Like I was awake." And I had a few of those. So that would explain the massive memory loss that most of these gay kids have, where they're like, I don't remember. The ones that think that they remember everything, that stand by it as like, this was the best thing ever. I notice there's a pattern with those people too. They're usually doctors and lawyers, like today. It's always doctors and lawyers that are like, I had a great experience and I remember everything. And it's so I don't know what that's about, but those ones seem to have not like the same program some of us were in.
Interesting. I've come to some conclusions too, just from
Yeah.
guests, and then obviously the little expose episode that I had on the podcast. A lot of the same things that you said, and it seems like there's different layers to the program. Like there's kind of an overall gifted and talented where there's like many students sort of invited into it, and then there's sort of like these little sub programs of it, just like in
Hmm.
Ultra, where then
Hmm.
out of those groups, there's like other groups that are kind of selected and taken out into like specialty areas. And it seems like there's different experiences with wherever they went, depending on where they went. And so many MK Ultra survivors that I've had on my show, satanic ritual abuse survivors, like high IQ has been like a consistent thing that a lot of these survivors had and were discovered to have in school. And a lot of them were guided into these programs, and they specifically, recovered memories of hypnosis and drugs and,
Hmm.
programmed, so it's a very, very interesting topic because it still exists today. And that's the thing that's worrisome is it's like it's glorified as like you're, an exceptional child if you go in. And again, not that every child that goes in is necessarily like getting tortured or something
No,
bad
yeah.
happening. But the
No.
overall view of it is that it's like this accelerated program that you should be really happy and excited your kids invited into, and like nobody asks any further questions. And it's so weird how so many kids don't remember. And I've seen a couple random posts that didn't have quite as much engagement as yours, but and even on the podcast that I did, of people being like, oh my gosh, I remember I was in it, but like I don't remember anything. And that's super weird that so many people are like, I don't remember anything, but they remember like so much else of their childhood potentially, or that school year, but just not like specifically in that program.
Yeah, so my research has like shown me some criteria that actually like has, I believe, like this goes hand in hand maybe with monarch programming, and we won't go like, well, we could do a whole episode on gate and monarch programming sometime, but I
Yes.
just say like what I do know is that um these kids like were put through screening tests around grade 1 through 3. Some were selected by the results of the test, and then they went into separate classes, and sometimes some went into separate schools for a day or uh, like a day or so each week. Some of the kids that talk to me too, like that have memory, like women, This one woman reached out to me and she remembers being bused with a bunch of other girls somewhere else. And I want to say that this isn't just gifted kids too. I think special education kids have also been targets for certain things, like mentally handicapped people, which really breaks my heart to hear this. Like this woman told me about, she was in special education and with a bunch of other girls, they were taken to another facility during school hours without their parents knowing. And they were given like vaginal examinations, like at a young, like childlike age. There, nobody should be doing that on you in school for, and like all that other stuff is very weird. So she just remembers this and like it unlocked that memory. Just the gatepost is telling me like that it was really traumatic for her, that she was like in a room, like getting examined by a doctor and a bunch of different nurses, and that she remembers going back on the bus back to school and all the other girls, she didn't know what they experienced, but they all rode home silently. No spoke about anything. And that wasn't like the first person that reached out to me has like some storyline of being sexually assaulted by a teacher or by like a gate teacher even, like. And so I don't know, like I don't want to say everybody had this experience either. Not everybody had sexual trauma at school, but it is something that has happened and it hasn't really been talked about like that often because it's so like it's like, this is supposed to be a good thing. This is supposed to be a positive thing. And it is in a lot of ways. There's a lot of goodness that can happen from it. Like I can go into that more about, how I was groomed to be a leader and all the leadership stuff I did. But there's an element of clandestine bullshit that's happened with this program and with other government operations. We know, okay, like, so let's just trace back to history. Like, we know if you like, that they have done clandestine operations. Like, MK Ultra is disclosed, it's not a secret. There's all the sub projects and a lot of information is already out there. All you have to do is have the knowing and go look for it. We know like they've done things like the Tuskegee experiment where they basically injected people like unknowingly with stuff. Like they've been experimenting on American citizens for a very long time. This is not new. So like we're in modern day disclosure about what we are and who we are and what we've been a part of, and like we just need to like have a conscious conversation about our education system. Like what are we teaching our kids and what are we grooming them for today? Like I would like to see the education system revised where we can add where we can like cultivate our gifts rather than like try to harness them and use them for the some other purpose. Like actually like help children to like learn their own power and how to use it. Um, Teaching mindfulness in school and like just personal empowerment is really important. And I think a lot of kids just get programmed from a young age to be a certain way, to do a certain thing. And later on in life, it's like once you've set a program up, it like runs itself on autopilot. And it's like you don't know like the formulative years, what's being embedded in your consciousness, and where it's going to take you down the line. So I think like, the education system could use a little revisal, not without throwing the whole thing out. Like we just need to be more conscious as parents and as like community members. Like what are we learning and like why are we learning what we're learning and what are we doing with it?
Amen. And yes, I would love to have you on to do a gate episode and we could
Yeah.
like go through some of your comments and stuff
Yeah.
like that. And before we move on, I want you had sent me another post that a woman made about gate and about this turning on and off. And I wanted you to just talk about that real quick because I think that that's something all of us can keep in mind, but it was especially sort of interesting how it pertained to gate too in particular.
So I had a couple different women and they used the exact same word terminology. They said, I feel like I've been turned off. Like I feel like something's been turned off like inside me and then just got turned back on. And this, I saw a woman's post recently who spoke to the same thing. And she said that like she felt like it was like a light switch that she needed to turn back on and like activate that part of herself again. And like it was turned off and then turned it back on. And I thought, that's a good way to put it. It does feel like kind of like the lights were off and now they're coming back on. And like, with that, in that respect, like I think what we're experiencing right now as we're like sharing our individual stories is we're really like quite literally activating that light switch in each other. Like we're remembering, and the hypnosis is like being broken in a way, like this trance that we've been in for so long. It's like we are activating one another as we share our stories individually. It's like we're each a little fragment of each other in that respect. And so the light is literally getting turned on. And I think it's really encouraging because I'm seeing a lot more of it.
Yes, and I loved that post too, because that lady was like, "Yeah, when I went and gate, I had my light on. When I got out of it, it was off," and she was talking about that, and I just thought, "Wow, what a beautiful and really powerful analogy for us to think about, what has overcome us." Like, that really is what happens. Like, we're born as this bright light, and then we go to school and our lights kind of shut off, and we're just sort of like, sit down, shut up, memorize, don't fail, pass, pass, pass. You're not allowed to make mistakes. And it
Mm-hmm.
takes that light and kind of shuts it off and makes us very robotic in a sense. And then we're funneled into like whatever we can memorize the best. That's like what we should do instead of, like you said, teachers looking at a student and saying, "Gosh, you are so talented, in whatever your natural gifts are, your spiritual gifts too." Like, that's we're so separated from spirituality in school, and it takes a child away from like their in itself in a lot of ways.
Mm-hmm.
I love how, like, you talk on that because I think myself and this audience that you're talking to right now, like, we all agree on that, and I think that's such a beautiful way to put it. Like, we need to turn our light switches on because even the most awake person out there has still, to some degree, had their light switch turned off, and collectively, that is how we turn it back on, is by, like, relearning our history, relearning who we are, and like you said, being acknowledged for gifts without the fear that they're gonna be exploited, like, knowing that there's gonna be safe adults that, like, wanna foster those and cultivate them and use them in a way that's gonna bring humanity forward instead of, sadly, it's like, especially in MK Ultra, like, the more gifted and spiritually gifted you are, like, the more torture you get, instead of it being the opposite where it's like the more care and love is put into those gifts to make that person be able to use them later on in life, or even as children and like do something for humanity with it, and so I think people like shut off their gifts too because we fear using them because they're not like socially acceptable, and so conversations like what you're having and like what you do for work even, like, you're turning people on, and, like, helping them reignite that light that so many, adults, whether safe or not, maybe didn't know consciously that they were shutting off or did, but, like, as adults now, I think, like, what better time to turn our light on than now and today, like, with knowing this information. So thank you so much for sharing that, and, like, thank you again for putting that post out, that's not something a lot of people are willing to talk about. I think it's really cool that you're willing to ask questions and put yourself out there like that, and you received a lot of cool feedback. So I'm gonna post that your TikTok obviously, but I'm gonna see if I can get the link to just that specific post too and put it in the show notes so people can go right there and like, check it out and read it. Really cool that you did that. And so with all that, let's go back to your story. So how long were you in GATE and what were sort of the middle school, high school years like for you after those experiences in elementary school?
Okay, so I don't really know like how long I was in gate, but I do know that like in junior high, like after I did Odyssey of the Mind in sixth grade in junior high, I remember being selected for like different leadership conferences. It started in junior high. Like I was chosen for like the American Legion, like whatever that was, some women's thing, and like I was part of like the Hobie. I think it was called Hobie Leadership Conference. I don't know if anybody would remember that if they were part of it. It was called Hugh O'Brien, but he was like Hobie Youth Leadership or something like that. And it was Hugh O'Brien, the guy who like created it. And I just remember like I think I was a sophomore in high school when I went to his leadership conference. It was like in I want to say like somewhere like Malibu or something in LA. But I was in like uh this like conference with all these kids from different schools all over California, I think. And one of the guys I met there actually was Rob Lauer. He was Matt Lauer's nephew. Do you guys remember Matt Lauer from the Today Show? Yeah, so I met Rob when we were just 16, and I remember him really distinctly because he was such like a sweet soul. And I remember him telling me that all he wanted to do was be a history teacher. And he felt like he was being forced to become something he didn't want to be. Like he was being groomed for like a different role than he wanted in his family, you know? And I just like I think that's kind of how a lot of kids maybe felt too, like that I met. There were some that looked at it like they were just totally in it to win it, competitive children. And then there were other kids that were sensitive in nature that were just like going on along to get along, like doing what was expected. Um, but at this leadership conference, I remember like I remember it like kind of like in blurbs, but like it was a lot of like grooming you to be an influencer, like how to like kind of like connect groups of people and like how to like express yourself fully and boldly. And it was like a lot of, I would just say like I had a lot of influencer training. They called it leadership, but it was influencer training most of my life, you know, and this is before social media. So, you know, we didn't think of an influencer like we back then as we do now, but this was like a lot of my history. And then like when I got into high school, I went to a Catholic high school um that I had like go 30 minutes out of town for. And I remember I was like in youth ministry, which was another like leadership thing. It was like, you know, running the show kind of. And so I like had a lot of leadership training when I was a kid, which felt so strange because like I said, there was always two people living inside me, one that was like an extrovert and like a networking, you know, person. I could hold an audience. And then this other person that was just painfully shy, like didn't want to be seen, didn't want to stand out in a crowd and like so I like kind of like had I think I wore a mask like a lot of times. Like I knew how to like mask myself and be like confident and how to like just go into second persona. And then like there, when I was not in front of people, I was like shy and drawn a little bit more. Um so yeah, I mean like I think I had a good education as far as like being groomed as a writer. I was like really used uh a lot for like writing exercises. I was in writing contests and oral language festivals, like speaking contests as a kid. And so I was writing my own prose and poetry and performing them. I was performing like I did a lot of like performance stuff and writing. And I was awarded a few different things as a kid growing up. And it's so weird to me because it was like I said, like a cross between feeling good about myself and then feeling like embarrassed at the same time. Like I just didn't want the attention. So yeah. And I think a lot of that just has to do with like the unprocessed trauma I had as a young age, like just feeling kind of insecure in my physical vessel, just being seen and you know what I mean? So yeah, I had like two different very distinct people living inside me during those years.
Did you suffer dissociation or dissociative identity disorder? Do either of those? Yeah.
Big time. I didn't know what that was until I met Kathy O'Brien. She was kind of like a big eye opener for me when I started hearing her speaking. She came into my like reality very actually literally like she showed up at my door one day when I was going I was like already married and like I was really like lost. It was like around 2017 I want to say.
Wow.
But like Kathy O'Brien came in and like I started learning more from her and looking back I'm like, "Oh yeah, like that makes sense." So as a writer, my alters really came through a lot. Like I had different names and like Red Berry Freedom was this, I'll tell you about that girl later. But Penny Scarlet was like this like erotic poet that just like confessed like everything in her poetry and told on everyone. And it was like, then I had, you know, me, just Katie. Like that was, so I had at least three different like personalities operating as a system within me, Like, and one was like this really like the showboat Penny Scarlett, who was like the webcam model, the mistress, like do it all. And then there was like Red Berry Freedom, which she was like uh the one that like was like the political one that knew like what I was like kind of doing from a political standpoint. Like I was very tactical and like I knew stuff like on a more like political and militant type level. And then there was Katie, that's just me, like this other girl who is just like kind of shy and like holding space for all these different parts of myself and like trying to integrate. And that Katie's like the more like just like the more softer spirit, I guess, you know. And these different parts of me were manifesting themselves when I was on drugs. Like, so I didn't start using hard drugs until I was like almost 30 years old, which is crazy. Like, just like this detour in life and like go from being like a upstanding citizen and a wife and a mother to being like a total deviant. Um, so that like we can maybe segue into how that happened, but
Totally.
when I started to like because I was all that stuff was turned off, like the intuitive stuff and like everything. It was kind of turned off and didn't start turning on until we're gonna jog backwards a little bit till I was working in the medical field. So I wanted to go into creative arts as a kid, as an adult, but like my family pushed me into going into nursing just because it's what we do. And it just made sense from a logical standpoint to be a nurse, not be a starving artist. And so I I went into the healthcare industry and I worked for 10 years there. And when I was working in a family medicine practice, this is like before I became a conspiracy theorist. Um, I had a patient come to my desk when he was checking out one day and scheduling his follow-up appointment. And he just like decided to just dump this really heavy stuff on me, like out of nowhere. I mean, he's a normal guy to be coming in for years, didn't know why that particular day he decided to tell me this, but he felt like he needed to tell me that he was in the Air Force. This guy was like 61 at the time. And he said that he was in the Air Force. And while he was there, he was working in an underground base with extraterrestrials. And he was like, you have to know that they are working with ETs in underground bases. And I'm just listening to him talk. And he told me like about some experiments that were done on him from the US military while he was serving and how they hurt him a lot, like how he was really hurt. And he said they were experimenting on him because of his DNA. And so I'm like sitting there, I'm like in my 20s, at the time, and I'm just like, wow, that's a lot. And something inside me like felt like he was telling me the truth, even though like I had never been introduced to any of those types of thoughts or ideas before. And I was like, over here on this side of the spectrum where like I read ICD-9 codes every day and I'm like, this guy could be mentally ill. I just felt like he wasn't for some reason the way he spoke to me. And like I'm into like I could feel people and see things sometimes too. And like I just knew like he needed to be like heard, like something happened to him that may actually be true. So I went and told the doctor after that and I talked to him and said, this is what, he told me. And the doctor just shrugged his shoulders and was like, well, he's bipolar. Like as if that was like the answer to the equation. And I thought, like that doesn't sit right with me. It doesn't sit right with me to like, even at that time, before I was diagnosed with any of these other things, I felt like we were dismissing people with ICD-9 codes, like diagnosing somebody with something that maybe we're not really fully aware of. Like we're giving them these labels. Like, so that same week, I had another patient come in and drop some other conspiracies on me. And I was like, what's going on here? And he came in and he's like telling me he thinks the water department is poisoning everyone. And, like just sharing all this intel. And I'm like, okay, no, I was always like someone that seemed to attract those types of people, like that felt like they could just share stuff that they didn't talk about publicly to other people. They would come to me and just dump. And I'd be like, all right, okay. And like at the time, I didn't really know why I was that person, but it does make sense in hindsight. But so we saw, like, I started to see like some correlation between people diagnosed with mental health issues and trauma of some kind and conspiracy, like governmental conspiracy. So I started getting curious then and like just learning a few things. Like I went and I had this book, it was literally called The Little Book of Conspiracies. I brought it to work and shared it with my boss, and we started like going through some of the most popular conspiracies that are out there and like kind of just chuckling and wondering like what the probability of these being true would be. And as that was like starting to trickle into my consciousness, more and more stuff started to reveal itself to me. Like I was getting weird, like everywhere I went, I saw like on TV screens, like it was playing something that was trying to get my attention. So I saw like celebrities breaking down. Like I would get these footage of like emotional breakdowns of celebrities, and then the bottom of the screen would have like this little like banner that said like, is this MK Ultra? And I didn't know what MK Ultra was. I was like, what am I seeing? And it just kept happening. Like more of this was like being brought into my consciousness. Like MK Ultra, the History Channel was playing one day and it was like telling about MK Ultra. I was like, well, okay, like so then my mind started going down the rabbit hole after that. I was like trying to understand all this. And as I went into this rabbit hole, it felt like information was just being given to me. It didn't feel like I was actually having to look for anything or research anything. I almost felt like I was being spoon fed, like something wanted me to know this stuff. Like something, someone, my algorithm, I don't know, like, but I came across information that I was like, how does nobody know about this? And it's still on it's on the internet right here, but nobody else is talking about this. Nobody else knows about this. And the intuitive part of me started to piece together like what I was learning and experiencing, and then pattern recognition. You put that like neurodivergent pattern recognition in there. And I started to like really see like the implications of how we were all kind of affected today. So I don't even remember where we went with this one, how I got on this.
No, you're good. This is really fascinating to learn
Yeah.
this. We're essentially just talking about your transition from, say, those
Um,
formative years into how you started going down the
oh
MK
yeah.
rabbit hole and then into sort of the sex work.
Okay, yeah. So like I started to see a lot of like I was given a lot of like information showing me how celebrities and elite were programmed with monarch programming, and that was like brought into my reality after I tied MK Ultra to monarch programming. And I learned more about it from Kathy O'Brien. I started to recognize like that this wasn't just a celebrity thing. It wasn't just affecting like people who were movie stars that were being programmed and handled and made to be like influencers in certain ways. I started to think like maybe this is like happening to all of us in some level. Like, and I like put together pieces of my own past and like my family's connections to alphabet agencies and people in them. And I like just started to like feel like there was a bigger story. But I like put a lot of it kind of on the shelf. I didn't like fully go like deep into that. I was still managing a life as a wife and a mother at the time. Had young children. It's like trying to keep up with life as it was happening. And then in like October of 2015, I remember this really distinctly because it was like the screens were doing the thing again where I'm like at the DMV and I can see the screen and it's like flashing a warning sign almost about the blood moon that was coming. And I'm like, why are they advertising the blood moon on the DMV screen? Like what is that? And it triggered something in me, like it activated something in me. And I started remembering like dreams. I started having all these like very vivid dreams. And I felt something was coming. Like I knew something was like happening and I couldn't explain it, but something in me like activated where I felt like I needed to do something really important, like go on a mission. and I didn't know what it was, but I was like willing to take off everything out of my life. Like I wanted to strip out of everything, like my role as a healthcare professional, as a mother, as a wife. Like it was so compelling that like I just was like willing to surrender everything to do this mission. And so I like started at that time, like started using drugs, and I like slipped into like my altered persona. Like it just came through because I think the drugs were like a really easy vehicle for that. And I thought like my life doesn't make sense right now. Like I need to find a way out. Like I had this like feeling of needing to get out of the matrix I was in, which was like felt like I was dying inside. Like I was. And I love my children, and I, just yet something inside me was like, I need to like get free and and I needed to get free to free other people too. And it was really a weird like feeling to have. Like I was like, something doesn't make sense here. So I go on Craigslist, and mind you, like I'm already under like a trance at this time because I am in an inebriated state, like not fully conscious of like this Katie is not active. Okay, so other Katie is out there like on Craigslist trolling, and I see this ad that says like moms make 500 plus a day working from home, and I thought that sounds good. I mean, it was like 2014, 15 at the time. And I was like, I didn't know a lot about how to make money from home. I didn't want to be like in an MLM scheme. So I thought this looks good. And I click on the ad, and it's like, this girl has like a phone number, and I call or texted it, and then she calls me. And it's like a woman who's recruiting me into webcamming. And she's just like, super jovial, and explains to me like how she's been doing the work, and how it's like super easy, and just send me a few pictures, send me your ID, and we'll get you set right up. And I obviously, hindsight, I was so stupid, like I didn't really think about any of this. I just handed over all my information. I gave her my ID, gave her pictures of myself, and she was like, oh yeah, this is going to work out great. And next thing I know, I'm like set up on these webcam studios, like these platforms. And I didn't sign any contract. Somebody else signed for me. Somebody else was basically like taking the money of anything that I would earn, and they were going to give me a percentage of it. So it was like being pimped out online. And I remember like thinking, this doesn't feel right, but I still was like, I got to try this anyway. So I need to make some money. And like when I started camming, I was like, I ran it like I was working a talk show. It was so random, like to see how I manifested myself. I started like doing like a talk show where I was fully dressed and I was on camera, and I was like entertaining people. Like I thought I was, my own little talk show. And I didn't like expose myself in a public way like that, in like a public setting. It wasn't until like I started to notice too, like the owners of like these campsites and stuff, they were like kind of spying on me. It felt like they were like checking me out, and then they would like, one of the guys like took me to a private room, and like that like felt weird. And then like I felt really like I didn't last for very long in there because I felt like something was wrong. Like something was up. I had made $500 in like a day, and I didn't see a penny of it. And I was like thinking like, shit, I'm getting pimped out online right now. And like, that didn't feel good. I was very angry. I wasn't allowed to take back any of my content, like any of my pictures or my name. They wouldn't like, my profile belonged to them. And so that pissed me off. And I was like really feeling like violated in a way. And then it's weird how once you're in that world, like you just go in deeper instead of just being like, I got to get out. You just go in deeper. So the next thing I know, like I got recruited from this other guy in Maryland. He lived in Maryland, and he had like a studio of his own called Angel Girls Studio. I don't even know if it still exists today. Like to this day, I think it was like a psyop of some kind. But he asked me, I told him about my experience, and I was like, I don't want to be used like that again. And he's like, I've got a different job for you. And he gave me like an opportunity to be a recruiter myself and be like in marketing. And so I was like, okay. And I thought that was okay because it's amazing how desensitized you get when you start walking into this world. You don't really see like your morality the same way. And
And
like, I
you're
just,
a trauma survivor too. So like in a way, it was like not normalized for you, but familiar too.
yeah, yeah. And so like this guy, his name was Larry, and he was kind of like coaching me and like, grooming me too from a distance, like on how to do everything. And like I was obviously very talented. My other persona was like very good at like recruiting people and make like being a front woman for stuff. Like it brought out that diva in me that was like wanting to be seen and heard and like so he used me, used my face, used my image and my likeness to be his recruitment. And like a woman always will trust another woman when it comes to like this industry, right? It's like how I got in, it was another woman that brought me in. And so I was like a front woman for Angel Girl Studios. I was recruiting women from all over the world, not just the United States. Like I had one of my very good friends was from London that I had brought into this. And like that's a whole we'll have a whole nother episode on this story. Um but the women that I brought in were women who had also been through like trauma. They had told me like they didn't want to be strippers or do porn anymore or like other things that were more dangerous. So this was like a safer form of sex work than what they had been a part of. So in my mind, I'm thinking I'm doing a good thing. I'm helping these people be able to like make a living. So this webcam thing that we were part of, like we were paying people an hourly wage just to be on the camera. And we had told them that you don't even have to take your clothes off. Like it's a non-nude webcam thing. And that's why I was like, oh, this is great. Like women can be performers, they can be themselves. I got women who are artists, musicians, like all these different types of creatives came in. And I didn't know until I started like moving up the ranks and he started making me like his model trainer and then started like using me as like the front woman and literally said I was the CEO of Angel Girl Studios and had me like as the face, even though I wasn't, but he was like using me for marketing that way, like you're the CEO now. And he was really just the back guy in the background doing all this stuff. And so like all these women came in, they like the droves because they were so inspired and they were like, I want to do what she's doing. I want to be empowered like her. And I got into like a subculture. Well, you know, it's amazing when you're in there like how many things you can get involved in, but I got into a subculture of BDSM and of specifically findoms, which is its own like crazy cult. Don't do it, ladies. um and I went into findoms and I learned how to be like a financial dominatrix. And it was really interesting because my intuitive gifts were used in a nefarious way, I would say, because I intuitively, intrinsically understood mind control. And I was able to implement hypnosis and mind control on other people while I was there. That was like my specialty as a findom was hypnosis. And um, it's really weird to think about it in hindsight. But that was something that I did, and it was like a fetish for some people. They like wanted to be like controlled by somebody like me. They wanted to have someone control their a lot of these men that were like part of this, they were successful men. They were like really like self-made entrepreneurs. They had a lot of money. And so there's like a lot of power exchange that happened in these rooms and these circles of people. And I was like sort of like curious and investigating people and like studying the psychology of my subjects while I was also actively playing a role. And I wouldn't say that I was ever really truly like believing anything I was doing. I knew I was acting the whole time. Like I knew I was like slipping into this other person and I was collecting intelligence on people. And so like it was unconscious, but also like sort of aware at the same time. I was like very good at it and very methodical. Like people just told me all their stuff. I knew about people's like their secret lives. and it wasn't because I was trying to be like a spy or anything like that. It was just like, as an empath and as an intuitive, when you meet people in these places of darkness, they tend to just like reveal everything about themselves because they feel safe, because you're like a sex worker. So they're like, I could just share anything with you and I can be anything with you. And so I took on like a lot of like heavy, dark subjects while I was there, and, experienced like people who were pedophiles and that needed to like act out those fantasies. I experienced like people who had their own trauma and they needed to heal. So I felt like I was between like being a healer, an actress, and a businesswoman at the same time. It was very strange.
And I see too how your heart and what you're doing now sort of shone through in a way that was sort of manipulated and exploited. Like you are so passionate about helping women, and that has been your journey. And it seems like that, again, going back to like whenever you're a child, inviting the other kids in the room, I feel like your intention was like that same, I'm trying to do something good. My heart's in the right place. Like I'm trying to help, trying to gather all these women in and like create a healing space in a sense and like help them, not knowing sort of the other side of the perception of, what you know now. So it's kind of interesting too how your story sort of has these themes that go through it, where you can really see your heart shining through in like these dark moments, or these moments where you were misunderstood, or these moments that you can look back and have like a higher thought understanding as to what you were doing.
Yeah.
But it's really amazing. Like, I was telling you before we got on here, like I'm so grateful that I grew up in a time where technology was not available in that way. Like there was not
Yeah.
webcams whenever I was in school, and te cell phones were just coming out as I was like starting to, finishing up high school, and they were very just little flip phones. There was no, recordings and stuff like that. It was just very, very simple. But it's like, man, it is so simple to get roped into this. And I want to do like
Yeah.
an episode with you just on
Yeah.
this topic because it is so prevalent. It's literally everywhere. And it's like I see more and more people being pressured to do it because it is such an easy thing. Like you said, how could it be bad or how could it be sex work if it's right in your own room? Like you're safe,
Hmm.
you're in a contained home, you're not with some pimps who are taking you to shady locations. Like it seems very PC, seems very easy, and it seems safe, but as you know, like and how you found out it, nothing further could be, the truth with this. Like it's very dangerous and there's a lot of nefarious things that happen. It's very harmful. It's scary, in a lot of ways, like how easy it is to get roped in and then all of a sudden you're, being trafficked or being exploited, or
Yeah.
being a recruiter, like you said, and then it's like, whoa, how did I get here?
Hmm.
So, like, I really wanna do, like, a deep dive into this just because I think just for, this being the day and age that it is where it's so accessible, I really want people to understand just how dark this gets and how we need to really put some thought into consideration about adding this to what we're advocating against, and, like, really getting loud with speaking out against it and, like, helping to educate these younger generations that, hey, there's better ways that you can, make money and, like, take your gifts or take your beauty or take if you wanna be a talk show host, like, whatever it is that, like, you wanna be, like, you can find other ways to do it that don't put you in danger and don't exploit you. And like you said, then you're essentially giving your body and yourself to somebody else who can do whatever they want with those photos and those videos against your will, which is scary too. Because if you decide you want to get out of that, well, guess what? Your footprint's still there and you can't like fully leave it. So let's definitely do a deep dive into that. I think that would be a fascinating topic to do. And so
Yeah.
thank you for sharing that. That's, I'm sure, like a really traumatizing part of your story to sort of, go through and to heal from, especially because like you said, it was just this compulsion that came over you, this other Katie came out and like just wanted to do this so much. So talk about the end of that. So how did you end up, what was your come to moment of, wait a minute, I need to get out of this, and let's start talking
Yeah.
about this recovery journey and healing journey that you went on.
Okay, so like how I got out of the webcamming um is I was like at this place where like Larry, the guy who was running the show behind the scenes, he started like, I just started to feel like more and more exposed and like used as like influencer for that. And he created two different other websites using my name and my likeness and like my persona to recruit women. And one was like katieladies.com and another one was mistresskate.com. And like Mistress Kate was like the persona of like like a mean mistress, like telling like men to just hit, like basically like it was like a spot to just get like these micro beta guys to just send money. And the other one, and I didn't see anything, not a dime of any of this. And then like another one was the Katie ladies, which was literally like designed to create like a syndicate and like recruit a bunch of women to teach them how to become a financial dominatrix. So like as you can see, this like was taking like its own complete life form where next thing you know, like I could be basically like the groomer to teach women how to like mind control men and how to take their money, you know? And like I started like thinking this does not feel right. My parents actually found out, like, because I don't know, they like have super connections apparently, and like they knew like almost immediately with some of these things when they went live. And my dad actually helped me like fight this guy and get these websites taken down and like have him like give me the domains and stuff. Like it was crazy. But what really like set off the alarms for me was when I'm like working and I'm seeing emails coming through like the back office for Angel Girl Studios. And I got this really creepy, cryptic email that said, how much traffic can you get for a young African American girl? And I immediately red flagged that. And I thought, so I wrote to Larry and I was like, what the heck is this? Like, this is not cool. And he just responded like he had no idea what he was talking about and was like, traffic, internet traffic has nothing to do with the race of a person. And like, just like acting like they were talking about internet traffic, like how much traffic can you get? And I knew like everything inside me was like, this is bullshit. Like, this is bad. And Larry had said something to me too that like I heard and it went off in my head where he said, you know, if we're lucky, we can get them into porn after this and make even more money. And so I was like, holy shit, no. Like I'm taking women out of this. I've sold them on an idea that they're in a safer place and I don't like this at all. Like, this is not what I signed up for. This is not what I want for myself or any other woman. And so I like kind of like snapped out of it, like really like something inside me was like, no. And like, so I fought this dude and like my dad actually helped me to be able to like get the domains from what, you know, I was a part of. Thank you, Dad. And so that was the end of Angel Girls and the Findoms and all that other stuff, which we can touch more on later. Um, but it wasn't the end of like this journey. So like I don't know why, but like I just kept going deeper and deeper, no matter how messed up like I knew things were. I felt like I had to keep like going deeper. And I started like going into the sugar baby world. And I was like very, very exposed there where that's where I started meeting like people that I consider like maybe handlers or groomers in that world. Um, and I want to touch on this just briefly, just because I know we'll go deeper into it, but I want to touch on this just to say that while I was in this world that was very convoluted and I experienced a lot of like divergent type of behavior, I feel that being in the places that I went and meeting some of the people I met, meeting with some of the darkness, you know, I was meeting with darkness within myself and not just other people's stuff. Like, I felt like maybe part of me was compelled to go into this world because of my own trauma and my own like fear of people and of things. Like, I needed to like go straight into it, like to experience the thing I feared the most or like understand it in some way. So what I take from like what that experience was is like it wasn't all bad. It wasn't all negative. And there were actually like probably some angels along the path with me that were in there and that were like helping me integrate parts of myself that were like the traumatized child. And you know, I just think that's like worth mentioning, you know, like I had let go of a lot of my presuppositions that I had because I went into this experience. And it just like gave me like a greater understanding and compassion for the deviance that might be in other people. Like that I just see a lot of people just like generational trauma that creates like a lot of the distortion.
Absolutely. And you can see how somebody who's very vulnerable, who has been traumatized, who hasn't yet embarked on their healing journey and like built that resilience within them, those in understanding what narcissism or abuse is or boundaries or trafficking, you can see how it makes like the perfect candidate for something like this because of a lack of those things. And that's purely somebody taking advantage of a traumatized person. And like you said, then pretty soon, like you're in the porn industry or it's like there's just all these different steps that it can take you in. And especially if there's already stuff on the internet, it's sort of, that cycle of abuse of grooming, how you said. They start with little breadcrumbs, like leading you in, and then pretty soon it's like by the time you know it, it's like, wait, how did I get here?
It
So
doesn't take very long at all.
no, and I
Like,
love like I'm so sorry that you went through that, and I really love how you are in hindsight able to say, "What did I learn from this that I can teach other people?
mhm.
Like, what were the things? Like, why did I have to go through this?" And you see where you are now, which we'll get into, in a little bit, but you can see how this sort of like set you up for the work that you're doing now, because I feel like without some of these understandings, you might not fully understand the demographic that you're working with, and you got to see this darkness, but you also were able to go shine your light in there, and sort of illuminate it in a way and take what you needed from it and then get out safely.
Yeah, that's literally like the best way to sum it up. Thank
So what
you.
happened
Yeah.
what happened after that? So you get out, and then what was that road to recovery like once you or what I guess what was the final straw where you're like, "Okay, I'm done. Like I'm getting out." And what did that process look like? Was it just right away where you just cut it off and you said, "I'm done," or was that kind of a process, and how did healing from that look?
Um, so I was like hyper exposed between like the webcam world, findoms, and then the sugar baby world that I was in. And so when I decided to get out of the camming thing, that was fine. I like made a decision. I was like done. But like I had some backlash, and this is where like people don't realize there's like targeting and gang stalking that happens, where it makes you feel like even though you're a free person in your own home, you're not really free. So like I noticed something was up because like my friend, one of my good friends reached out to me, and this was like a year or maybe a half year later, and she's like telling me that her husband received a text message from with my face on it, and it was like check out Katie's pictures, or something like that, and it took him to a porn site. And the porn site didn't have anything of me at all. It was like a bunch of other women, but it was like they were using my face and my name to like be a clickbait for somebody else to click. And it was starting to get like anonymously sent to people that I knew, like targeting like friends or their husbands. And so like that obviously was like really shameful for me. And I felt like really powerless. Um, and like I felt really like my life wasn't my own anymore at that time. And so when all this was happening, like people don't realize like you can feel like a prisoner to this world just based off of like how your information is shared and how people like there were websites that were created that I had nothing to do with, where like someone had ranked me like sexually and like all the different like possible like things, about like whether I was good at this or that. And it was just like really weird because I was not that person, and they like even used a fake name. They like called me Sunny the soccer mom. And yeah, like it was just my face, and it was like these people had these like, so there's a lot of like crazy that happens once you get exposed in this world. Like you can go from being just a regular mom like I was to being like in this dark world, like this kind of like overly exposed person, and used like your image and likeness can be used however people decide to use it. So I got out of that, but I still had like a lot of, people that were like established gentlemen in my life. And some of them were like mentors to me, and others were what would I say, subjects of interest. Like I would be collecting intel on them. And it's like there's this little part of me that knew like I was kind of like I guess like a spy. And this other part of me that was like a compassionate human that wanted to actually coach people. So I was like coaching these people while I was like studying them and researching them, and they were mentoring me, and there was just a lot of like interesting happenings. But I had like I got out of that world for the most part, like took a break from it all, and I started going back and like diving into my spirituality. Like I never really left it, but I really was starting to channel more and starting to like get more um intuitive downloads about a lot of stuff. And as that was happening, I think like I like put that other stuff on the shelf, and didn't really revisit any of that world because it was such a short-lived period. It was like literally, I would say, like 6 months out of my life that all these crazy things were happening that I was a part of. Then like, one night, I guess we'll just jog to where like my awakening really happened. Is It was in April of 2016. I'm like up at the computer, and this is at the time I was starting to channel all this poetry and I'm writing. And I heard in my mind, like, I heard, "Who are the white winged divine consciousness of nine?" Like, and I was like, "What?" And I just like needed to like look that up. So I like Google whatever's in my head, these little, I'm like Googling, "Who are the white winged divine consciousness of nine?" And I get this like website that pops up, and it's like this conversation, like a dialogue between a person and their higher self. And it was like, "Are you my higher self?" And da, 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 da. And it's like telling this whole experience of like the DNA basically talking, like our DNA is like communicating with us. And it was very weird. So as I'm reading it, I'm like literally seeing like the words lift off the page, and it feels like 3D, like merging in with me. And I had like a complete consciousness shift at that moment as I'm reading that, where I felt like my crown just start to open, and I felt like something started pouring into me. Like it felt like I could feel this raining feeling inside my crown. And when that happened, my vision just completely went black, like completely black screen, like a black screen on a computer. And then I started seeing binary code raining down, like zeros and ones, like, and I know this sounds crazy. Like I had never seen the Matrix at the time, so I didn't know like, but that is literally like what it looked like, the Matrix, like binary code. It was green, black screen, zeros and ones. And as it was like happening, I felt like it was raining down inside me. Like I could feel like this tingling in my body. And then my vision wasn't my own. Like it wasn't like the way I could see today. It was like looking at a screen. And I started to see, first thing that I saw was like it looked like somebody typing, like, and I was looking at what they were typing on a typewriter, and it was like a typewriter sound. And then I saw like CIA and like documents being written like inside me. So I was like, what, what's happening? And then after that happened, then it was like all these pictures started flooding into my head, like little scenes from some other place in time. And I was like seeing rapidly like multiple different pictures of people, places, events. And as I was like watching this happen, I'm like getting this vibe that the people in my life are exactly what I think they are. And that maybe like I am the last to find out. It was like a really weird feeling of like, what is going on? And so I went into like a trance after that happened. Like it was like I was swept up in this swirl of pink light after that, and I felt like I was in this like out of body. I wasn't attached to my body. I was below, my body was below me, and I thought I was home for the first time. Like I had this feeling of coming home, and I felt like I was uh like in this, like, I don't know, it was just a swirl of pink light, but I felt really good there. And then it was exactly 3:33 a.m. I get a phone call, and it woke me out of the trance, and I came back into my body. And then I answer the call, and it's this voice that I don't recognize. And he's breathing heavily on the phone, and he's like, I was like, "Who is this?" and the person said they were the devil. Literally, that's what they said, the devil. And I'm like, haha, like I just figured it could be any guy that had my number at that time, like someone that knew me, someone, it was very confusing, but they were like just breathing really weird and just like kind of like talking like they were like moaning and stuff. It was like, I don't know who this is. So I hung up on this person, and they'd always call from a blocked number too. And I had no idea who it was. But after that happened, I went into a trance again, and I'm sitting at the computer, and I'm I'm not like conscious of what I'm doing, but like I woke myself up like in the middle of this trance, and I was like all these things were flashing on my screen of my computer. It was like somebody else had control of my computer and was like showing me videos. And then it felt like I was kind of being guided, like click here, go here, do this. And like in my trance, I was like following almost like following instructions on something. And one of the things like where I woke up was I saw myself like doing stuff to my computer that I had no idea consciously what I was doing. Like, I am not technical at all. My dad is, but I'm not. And I was just taking apart my software in my computer and replacing the drivers with new drivers and installing, like, I was doing some stuff that, like, to me, it's high level that I had no idea. I couldn't tell you how to do today. And then on top of that, like I was hooking up some mysterious bank account, which I have absolutely no idea how it appeared or showed up, to a PayPal account in Vergizi, France. Don't ask me why. I have no idea why. Like consciously, I don't know. Like, but I was doing like stuff that just makes no sense to me today. Like I just know for some reason, like the alternate Katie was in there doing stuff, and she was like doing things I have no idea about. And so obviously, like, I wasn't sober at this time either. So like it's really was hard for me to even talk about these things because a lot of people invalidate like your experiences if you are considered mentally ill or not sober when you have these wild stories to tell. Like you feel like you're like on big fish and telling like a tall tale. But this is literally like play by play, like some of the stuff that happened. And then so I started to feel like my body was breaking down at this time. Like I feel like I was shutting down like a computer, and I couldn't finish what I was doing. Like I was like failing my task or whatever. And I called my dad in the middle of the night, and I was like, Dad, I need 12 drivers to complete my programming. And, like that's obviously like a weird thing to say to your father, especially in the middle of the night. But I asked him for help, and I said, I need help. I need 12 drivers to complete my programming because I felt like I had to install something in my, like, I had to install a program in order to get myself to function. Like, I was like falling, like, I was losing myself. I don't know how to explain it, but like, I felt like I was dying or crashing in some way, and I needed to like install a software to keep going. And so yeah, I know it sounds wild. Like, so my dad came over, and I told him I thought I was part of MK Ultra and like sort of just like saying a bunch of stuff. And he was like, I think we need to go to the hospital. Like he was worried about me and my mental health, and I was very deteriorated physically too, because like I was super skinny then and like not I looked probably like I was out of my mind. And I don't know how much my dad knows or what he doesn't know. He's always said to me, like, I've forgotten more than you'll ever know. That was one of his favorite catchphrases. Yeah, hindsight. And but he took me to the hospital. And when I got there, I was very calm. I wasn't hysterical at all. I was just very matter of fact and told these people I thought I was part of MK Ultra and I was having like some malfunction or something. I was very like articulate. And I was shocked because just like, as a child, like being treated like you'd done something wrong, it was the same way I was treated in the hospital. They like immediately had security detail on me. They put me in an isolated room, took off all my clothes, like stripped me down like I was a weapon. I was perceived as a weapon. And I just was really confused by that because I was like, I'm over here like cool as a cucumber, just like what's happening? And I was treated like I was dangerous. And that was alarming to me too, to have like a security guard outside my door and like, and then my dad's like talking with this mental health guy who came in like a consult outside, third party consult came through, and they were like discussing what to do with me. And at this point in time, I just want to think my dad was like my advocate. I don't want to think like anything nefarious about his involvement or knowledge of something that, because I don't know for a fact what he knows and doesn't know. But I can speak to like the fact he was my advocate to get me where I went next. And then so let me backtrack. So like I had this like all these downloads coming in, and it was before I was at the hospital even, and I heard like messages, telling me like you're going to go to the cottage and there the water will be empty and you will meet your sister Beth, and like just like sounds schizo-y, like really schizophrenic. So, but I felt like I was getting all these like downloads, or messages were being told to me about what I was going to do next. So I'm at Marion Hospital in Santa Maria when this happened. And then next thing I know, the guy comes in and he's like, we're sending you to Cottage Hospital. And so I was sent to Cottage Hospital in Santa Barbara. And when I arrived, there was like an empty fountain. Like it was the drought season. There was no water. So it was like very clear, like that was a confirmation of whatever, I thought was going on in my head. And then my sister, Beth, I met her later on in Santa Barbara. Like she's not maybe my biological sister, but she's from where I was born back at home. And she also like became like a really good friend to me, and like has like a very keen fascination with this subject matter as well, MK Ultra stuff. So we met each other in Santa Barbara after this whole thing. So yeah, I was taken into Cottage, and I wanted to say about that, that was like a really nice experience. I was terrified. I was also very angry and like paranoid too, because I knew things I couldn't explain. And so I was in this place, Cottage Hospital 5 East, and it was like the special place for people to go that were having their own, like all the people, there was two different mental health wards, I feel like there. And one was like a normal one, and one was like the special one. And 5 East is where I was sent. And it was really like the Juilliard for mental health patients. I'll say that. Like they had a guy come in and played like Chopin and Mozart and stuff on a violin for us. And we had a yoga instructor. I had like the best food ever. I was like really getting really good care there. But my doctors, they were like these Ukrainian dudes, a Russian guy, like, and I remember his name is Dr. Mirovich. I remember him being like, I think you're very intuitive about what you need. Like he knew, like it felt like he knew my brain and what was in it and the things I wasn't saying. And he would like, they gave me these drugs and stuff, and they're like, you have to be on these if you're gonna be like normal in the world. You have to take these drugs. And it was like I was diagnosed officially like as a bipolar person at this point, and put on like different types of medications, like stabilizing mood stabilizers or whatever. Um, but I was like super aware that like there was more going on than what I was being told. So while I was at the hospital, like I had researchers from USC, I believe, come in, and like they talked to me in a private room and would ask me questions. And like I just remember like some of the questions they asked were like strange, like what does the word blue mean? What does daisy mean? And these are all like MK Ultra, like Monarch programming. These are like now in hindsight, I know what they mean. And when I was there, I knew what they meant too. And I was just like, people would ask me a question, I'd rattle off like blue means blah blah blah, blah, like purity, immortal, blue lodge. Like I was saying like everything tying to like Masonic, like dictionary type definitions, and like daisy is this, and like I knew what all of these things meant, as if it was like already like in there, and I would just be told something and like rattle off whatever, and they just take notes and then they left. um So anyways, yeah, that's a little brief summary of my hospitalization. Then I was sent to a place right after the hospitalization it was called CRC, it was cottage residential. And that was like a rehab. It was like a place people went for like a 30-day program, afterwards. And I was considered an addict. So they were like, yeah, she could qualify for this program. So they sent me here. And God, I met with so many people there. I met a lot of adults. I was probably one of the younger people that were there at the time. A lot of people were in their 40s and 50s that I was with, or like a little bit older than me. And I only lasted like about a week there because I think I got kicked out like a week or two in. I was different again and stirring up the group. And so I had this German dude who was like, I considered like a handler at the time, but he also was somebody like I kind of look up to in a weird way too, because he was like guiding me in this weird time. And he would tell me like he would talk to me on this like end-to-end encryption. Like you can't even get this app in the United States anymore. You can't even download it. It's Wicker. I don't know if you've heard of Wicker app. Yeah, so like he communicated with me on Wicker and he would like coach me almost like from a distance and he'd be like, how are things? Like, you're gonna find out who you really are soon. Like, I can't see you again until you fully recover yourself. And like, so I was taking like these schema tests over at Cottage Residential, and they're tests like I'd never seen before. And they were like personality tests. And they like would identify your maladaptive coping mechanisms and like behaviors. And like I had apparently like an angry, impulsive child schema. And I also had like another schema that was like, you know the right thing, but you just don't do it. Like you know what the right thing is and it's in your heart, but you don't act on it. Like I was someone who maybe like quietly like sat in the dark with the truth or something. You know what I mean? So they knew things about me. And then they made us take all these other tests like to statistically see what like would impact your relapse potential and all this other stuff. And I took this test and like my statistics were like basically your only chance of relapse is based off of one probability, and that's social influence. Like how my social influence affected me would like affect me on a physical, like psychological level with substance abuse. And so I wrote a note to them and I remember like being like, hey, apparently I don't have the chemical physical dependency issues and all this other stuff. My only factor is social influence. And I said, can you guys help me? Like I wrote a note, passed it into the center. And the next thing I know, like, I mean, I was being packed up and sent away to another place. And that's where I was sent to Sovereign. It was called Sovereign Health in Palm Desert. And that is where everything started to come alive, really. Like, I met all of the people that were like me and like the gate kids that I've met. They were all there at Sovereign. So we can touch on that a little bit if you want.
Yes, go for it.
Okay, so there's this there was a facility, they called it Sovereign or Sovereign Health at the time, and I was sent there because they thought that I was too high level for like whatever my mental health or whatever else was going on with me. They couldn't handle me at Cottage. I was triggering people in the groups. Um, and so I went to Sovereign, and I was in these like we were in these like really nice houses in Palm Desert, like in the tennis court country club area, and it felt like we were like in witness protection, hiding in plain sight. Like so I was in this house with these women. I moved to two different houses while I was there, but um we were in these like nice houses with like pools and country club, but we were locked away. Like we could only leave the house when we left as a group and got in the van to go to the center. And when we were at the center, I remember that's where we got all of our programming. I remember like the very first day, the ladies like in the center, and we were with boys too, because there was men and women here, not just women. And at the center is where we met all the boys, and they were like, "You're here to be deprogrammed and reprogrammed." Like they literally just put it out there, like you are here to be deprogrammed and reprogrammed. And I'm like, all right, like that sounds about right. And while I was there, like I was trying to piece together all this information. Like I was on this little, felt like a scavenger hunt. Like I found like Greg Braden's book, Fractal Time, and like started piecing together like history and where we were today. And then I started sharing with other people that were around me, like my own experience. I told them about my crazy, like brain opening moment where I saw binary code and the connections to the CIA and all this other stuff. And like, I was really surprised to hear other people had other pieces of that story or information that they could help supplement my own understanding. And like, so like I met boys and girls, but mostly it was the boys that knew a lot that were there. They were like filling me in on the details that I didn't know, and they all had a little bit of everything, like sharing like stuff like the reptilian agenda and like stuff that would be considered conspiracy theory today. But then some of them had some very like interesting storylines too. And like if I were to tell you the pattern, like a lot of them had childhood trauma. A lot of them were definitely under some kind of monarch programming, based off of like the abuse that they experienced. And they were all very gifted. There was not one person there that wasn't gifted. They all had like extrasensory perception. There was a lot of musically gifted people, people who were filmmakers, uh, like creatives, all kinds of creatives. There were prodigies there, and there were criminals. So like we were basically like a mix of like really gifted people that were really fucked up. Excuse my language, sorry. But messed up. We were messed up. And some of the people, like the interesting thing is like you were selected to go there. You weren't just like able to just get in, because as I found out, some of the boys I met from different states, they were given a phone call and an interview, and they were told like the foundation wants to pay for you to come. And like these people had no money, no insurance, and they were sent to this like high level rehab facility or whatever. And they were like sponsored by an anonymous donor. And yeah,
Whoa, your story has so many elements to it. I mean, the bio that you had sent covered a lot of things, and what you're covering now just goes so above and beyond. Like you've experienced so many different aspects of like this abuse system, and it was sort of just put in your path. These weren't things that you necessarily like sought out. It was like just happened to be like laid in front of you, like you said, and you were like guided to find these different things and to meet these different people
yeah,
along your way, whether it was, victims and survivors, or if it was, people that were like you and gifted and who had these supernatural experiences that were also very misunderstood throughout their life. So that's really neat just to see sort of like how this path led you down like this darkness to where then you were able to be like, I'm so misunderstood, but now I'm not. Like, I know I'm not alone anymore. I know that like it was like your light switch became on. It was like your
yeah,
light switch moment where you're like, okay, I'm not alone. Like, I'm not crazy. I'm not unique in the sense that like my story only happened to me. There's other people who understand.
yeah,
It's the rest of the world that needs to catch up. It's like you realize your own enlightenment in a sense in that way. And it's like, oh, like I'm just sort of ahead of the curve. I have understood things that like a lot of society is turned off to. And now I'm starting to meet the people that are also their light switch is turned on and they have had that awakening and can contribute. And I realize I'm a puzzle piece. I'm not like this weird outcast. Like I'm a puzzle piece
yeah,
that was in the wrong puzzle, like this is my puzzle. So I love that you were like guided to that, to where it went from like this very like lost time in your life to all of a sudden like belonging. So what happens
yeah.
happens after that whenever you start to meet these people? Were you in there long, and sort of how did that transition into the next part of your life?
So like I had to fight to get out, to be honest with you. Like they wanted to keep me there for a long time, but like that I wish now in hindsight I would have stayed longer, because actually looking back, like so much could be gained from that experience. They were teaching, so they broke us up into groups. And depending on like, I think they categorized us just like they categorize people in every way. And my group was like, they were teaching like interesting things. Like I remember being like told like time is an illusion, and like being taught like Einstein's theory of relativity, and like there was like different things that we did where we were like doing exercises in groups, like what is the most important thing that people need to know about you on social media, like that, like kind of like, again, the influence of grooming. I'm telling you, like that was kind of like a part of my whole story, is like, how do you show up for reality when you're out of here? Like, how are you going to present yourself? Who are you to the world? That kind of stuff. um and I didn't know at the time that I was masking so much. Like by 30 days in, I finally gave something authentic to my therapist. And he was like, "Oh, thank God." He's like, "I was worried. You were like so like disassociated and masked. You were not cracking as a person." I was like very just, everything's good. I don't, like I was so good at like this persona that was like trying to present this perfected, unmessed up, being. And obviously I was messed up if I was there, but I started to come into like actual authentic expression because of the people I was around. Like really truly, like the people I met that were sharing their stories with me helped me to unpack my own and feel like I wasn't alone. And then like some of us did this thing called Rock to Recovery, where we were part of a music group that met like once a week. That's where that poem was birthed.
Okay.
And yeah, we like made music together, and it just felt like a soul family. I felt like I was with like my spirit team on the ground. Like this is the ground crew. We're all here. We know we're here for like a greater mission. And like as we started sharing our stories with each other, everybody started like healing a little piece of themselves and not being as terrified about what we were a part of or who we were or what had happened. There was like less hysteria and more like goodness, I think, that started to arise by bringing these types of people together and letting them communicate, letting them create together. So I think Sovereign may have been a little bit of a psyop, to be honest, or like social experiment, just based off of what we experienced. We should bring some Sovereign people together on this conversation. I know some of them.
Yes, let's do a podcast. We'll do a panel.
Yeah.
That would be so cool.
But like I overall look back on it with fond memories. Like that was really a necessary timeline event for me, where I learned like, one, I'm not alone. Two, I'm not that crazy. Like if I'm crazy, then like all these people I guess are crazy too, and we're just nuts and we all have the same story. And then like,
Which is
I'm like,
totally normal, you know?
yeah, yeah. So I was like, I started to feel less like internal trauma and hysteria as I listened to other people unpack their stories and I shared my own. And I felt like this is really powerful. Like, and so as I like, this was only the beginning of my journey of recovery. So I had like several incidences where it was hard to go back to society and like know how to integrate as a regular person after all the things I went through. And I relapsed a few different times. And I finally decided like putting myself in a sober living for women for a period of time, which was like literally the hardest thing I ever did in my life, because as a mother, like I felt really torn. Like I had to take a break from that, from being a mom, and I had to like fully heal myself. And like that saying, when a plane's going down, you got to put a rescue mask on yourself first before you save your child. And that was what I had to live by, that philosophy, in order to get through this. And so I lived with these women in this giant house in Santa Barbara. It was like an old Victorian mansion type house, and all these women lived together, and we all, like, just like the Sovereign people, they all had very similar patterns, like very similar patterns. And we can talk about that more when we go into like another storyline about MK Ultra and monarch programming. But they all shared a lot of stories of early childhood trauma, and we all had very similar like pieces of each other in our storytelling. So as we're in this sober environment and we're trying to like unpack the old story, that was like the first time in my life that somebody, like, when I was in recovery, told me like, "You're romancing your past." And I remember like being told like I'm romancing the past, and I thought that's like a little offensive. But then like this woman like helped me realize like, you need to like graduate from your old story. You need to graduate from being a victim and feeling like disempowered into something else now. And so I got a sponsor and started working with other women too. And this was like the first time in my life someone introduced me to the concept of taking my own moral inventory. And like I was like strategically walked through an exercise where I had to like take inventory of all the resentments I had. And I had like 100. I didn't even know I had inside me as soon as I started writing, and then see the pattern of that, and then write down like, you know, how each of these things affected me, like each of these hurts affected me on a social level, psychological, physical, sexual. Like I had to like go in and categorize all this information. So it was like my brain was unpacking everything that I was holding a charge inside me about. And then ultimately at the end of that, I had to address what my part was in all of it. And you take someone who's like thinks they're a victim, and then you tell them, hey, you have a part in this somewhere. What part is that? Like, I had to like really start to see like, well, you know what? Like, I didn't stand up for myself here. I didn't address my boundaries there, or I chose to da 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 da. Like, and not all of it is like choice. Like when you're a child, you don't have a choice for some of the things that happen to you. And that's a hard thing. But as an adult, the choices we make later on based off of the trauma we experience, or like whatever we think or perceive as this world, we make choices and we go certain directions in life. And I had to go back and like look at the things I chose for myself, conscious or not conscious, recognize I had a part in all of it. And in that moment, like I took extreme ownership for my life, even though I didn't want to like let everybody off the hook. I also was like, I can't carry around this charge anymore of victimization. I am now truly sovereign because I am taking conscious inventory and extreme ownership of what happens to me moving forward. And that was a game changer for me, like to learn to take my own inventory, to see my part in things, take extreme ownership of my happiness and how it's going to play out. And like learning that like these are ways that we drop the heavy rocks that we're carrying in our life. Like we can graduate from being somebody who's a victim of abuse or mind control or bad decisions, you know, and like take your mess and turn it into like a transformative message for other people as soon as you decide like there's more to life than this, there is more to me than this. So I started like learning how to be a transformational storyteller by going into these anonymous rooms and hearing other people tell their experience, strength, and hope. And it was like a format in my mind that like stuck with me. It was like what it was like, what happened, and what it's like now. And I learned like if you're gonna tell a story, you gotta be able to like finish the story on a high note, or else you just leave people feeling like shit after they listen to you. And there's no point in that, you know?
Oh
So
my gosh. I love that so much. That is a really difficult thing to come to terms with
yeah.
our own responsibility and stuff. But at the same time, it's almost like learning about MK Ultra. Like it's so shocking at first, and it's like you feel kind of betrayed. Like, what do you mean? You know, it's easy to get defensive or to like push it away, but then whenever you look deeper, it's very empowering to have that knowledge, you know, and to be like,
Yeah.
oh my gosh, like if I chose one way, that means that I can choose another way. I'm not just stuck. Like I have a choice, and like that's a beautiful thing. Did I make maybe a wrong choice, or did I make a mistake, or a choice that now I would have made differently? Sure. But now I can make that choice differently, and I'm not held captive by, you know, some other force in my life, you know, holding me captive to being a victim to this forever. I love that you came to that, because it's hard, but it's really empowering and freeing to have that ability to take, as Kathy O'Brien says, responsibility, you know?
Mhm. Exactly. Your ability to respond. Maybe we had
There
the
you
same
go.
program.
Yes, there
But
you
like,
go.
yeah, like I feel like truly like that is where this story takes a more empowering turn too. It's like, you know, like I had a lot of layered programming and trauma in my life. I've had a lot of bad decision making that I walked into, whether I was under the influence of like something or whether it was my own like trauma response trying to discover something within myself. I made a lot of decisions, but I also like gained so much wisdom about like who I am and how the world works and who we are as like humans in this experience together, this mosaic, as we talked about in the beginning. And we're all pieces of a bigger story. And this is not like knowing what we know about MK Ultra, knowing what we know about like monarch programming and the forces of good versus evil and all that. Like it's empowering to have this knowledge because the principles of consciousness and mind control can be flipped on their head. And we can literally take that knowledge and use it for our own benefit, reprogram ourselves, repattern our thinking, like recode, however you want to define it. But like I like to think of it like this. You know how there's like an insert button on the computer, like that overwrite, and you can just like start over and start writing a new story. Imagine you have this story that's already been written. It's like huge story that's like you're not really sure you want to keep that story. Instead of having to go all the way back to the beginning and like having to just like start over and file through all of that, you can literally press like an insert button metaphorically on yourself and start right where you are today and like decide to rewrite your story and to repattern it. And when you do that, it kind of like erases the old story as you're writing, as you're speaking, as you're being this other person and embodying it. And that doesn't happen just by like a decision, but there's practices that we can take to like help recode ourselves and repattern. And we don't have to go as far back as like a lot of people think in traditional therapy, I've got to go there and I got to like access the trauma to heal it. I got to like remember to heal. You don't. You don't. You don't have to remember to heal. Like a lot of people probably listening today have patchy memories, or maybe like their brain doesn't want to go back to the trauma for whatever reason. That's fine. You don't have to. Like you can literally start today with where you are, what you know about yourself, and decide I'm going to change my narrative and like do what it takes to repattern that. And that's what I do. Like I had to choose a story about myself, one that I could live with, because when you uncover this type of stuff and this trauma, and you a lot of people dance on the Cartman triangle of being a rescuer, a victim, or a perpetrator. And if you want to jump off that wheel, you can become sovereign and truly sovereign and choose like a higher perspective of your experience. And for me, like I have told myself a story that's made me live with what I've experienced, which is that I believe my soul chose to be here at this time. And I came in maybe as a volunteer, like for humanity. And like I definitely feel like I took on some experiences and I walked some dark corners so that like I could have a greater compassion and understanding of how humanity is where it is today and like know how to bridge us out of it. And so I live with my story. I live with like the things that I once felt ashamed of with like honor now, because I see myself as like someone who took a path in order to maybe like transform things that are like really dense and heavy here on the planet, like which is our stories.
I have chills going up and down my body. And like whenever I hear you talk about testimonies, obviously that's like what I do on this podcast is share those just like how you do with people. And it like touches this special place in my heart because I'm like, she gets it. Like when I started this podcast and realized like the power of testimony, and this could totally just like make me cry right now, but like you realize, like, how powerful it is, like, our stories, and, like, we're so suppressed from telling them, like you said, like, we go through all these elements in life where it's like, "Be perfect," or "Don't mess up," and, like, "You're not good enough," and we feel so much shame with, like, what we went through, not realizing that, like, hey, at any time, like, we can take what we went through and, like, honor it, you know? There's a book called Man's Search for Meaning that I brought up a couple times on this podcast, I don't know if you've heard of it. There's a Holocaust survivor, and that's essentially like the whole premise of the book is like him figuring out how to like honor his suffering. Like he's in these horrible concentration camps. He's dying every day, basically. Like, how do you live when you're just in a perpetual state of suffer? right? Well, you find a way to honor that. You find a way to live through it. You find the light. No matter how dark it is, like you have to find a light essentially. And like survivors know how to do that better than anybody. And I think that that's like the most beautiful thing about a testimony is like you the more that we dive into our darkness, the brighter it makes our light. Like because what we're doing is like every darkness that we reveal, it's not dark anymore. It's not hidden. Like there's a light on it now. So like our entire past might be just this darkness, but the more that we like acknowledge it and like give it meaning and say, what can I do with it? All of a sudden it's not dark anymore. It's all of a sudden like just this bright spot. And it might not be something that like feels good or something that like we're just overjoyed that we went through, but we can say, I went through this and like it's something that is specific to me. Not everybody had this experience. So like just like how somebody would specialize and say, how you did with let's just say poetry. Like you've created beautiful poetry because it's something that like you found was good and you found a way to harness it to where it could produce positive messages. Well, we don't have to just take good stuff and do that. Like you can take bad things and like still honor it and like create something beautiful from it. And like that's what sharing a testimony does. It helps people realize that they're not alone. And I think if like we had these conversations more, everybody would feel so much less alone. They'd feel so much more confident and they'd realize like their own power and to like take that back and to realize that like everything they went through wasn't just for no reason, And like, of course, I don't advocate for child abuse. Hell no. Like, there needs to be justice and accountability for people who perpetrate that on children. Of course, like no child deserves that. No human does, no matter what age. However, if that was something that a person fell victim to, like you can still make that a bright point and you can still shine a light on it and you can still do something beautiful with it, which is exactly what you did. And so I want to move into that part of your story. How did you decide to become a transformative coach? What was your path like? And talk about like the power of testimony from your experiences through your work. And of course, just talk about the work that you do. I think it's amazing.
Yeah, so as I was learning about mind control in my like unpacking timeline, I started to learn the more positive things like how to program yourself and like how to self-program and like, so I started studying um some of the stuff like I learned like the gateway process and the Silva method and all that stuff. And then I was like, yeah. And it wasn't until like I really started to like invest deeper into my spirituality and like also just how that applied. Like I learned a lot of science and from Bruce Lipton and Joe Dispenza. Those guys like really like nailed a lot of stuff for me that felt right, like about how I could they taught me like you're not a product of your genes. You're not like a victim of your epigenetics. Like you can actually change and like turn on the switch and become supernatural. And so I started to learn more about like how like to help myself. So I started like teaching myself different things. I learned neuro linguistic programming and I like took a coaching course on that. And it felt kind of like as I'm learning all these things, like they were already there. Like there were parts of me that I already knew these things, but I was reminding myself. I learned energy healing, Reiki, and I had so many people like come into my life that were healers and teachers. And so I have like kind of like a background in metaphysical psychology and also like in holistic healing. I learned like how to live without medication because I had been medicated when I was in my early days of recovery and I just didn't, it was non-compliant and didn't want to live like that. They told me like, you're going to have to be on this medication your whole life if you want to live a normal life. And also your liver's going to probably fail around 40. And I'm like, no, thank you. And so I was like, because the drugs that they give you, they're really hard on the liver. And so I just knew inside me, like, this was not my story. This is not how I'm supposed to live my life. So I wanted to believe like I could heal my mind and heal my body and my heart, all of that a different way. So I started studying different modalities of healing that were not Western medicine. And have like a very multifactorial approach to healing now. But I eventually became like a life coach because I realized like that's what I already did naturally or intuitively is work with people, help them unpack their stories and help like reframe their experiences in a more empowering way that they can live with. And I thought it's like that's what my higher calling is at this time, is I want to help people like me who have walked a walk that's maybe convoluted and that have not really felt safe unpacking themselves with a therapist. I never trusted doctors or therapists. I never sought help like I could have gotten, maybe because I didn't feel safe talking about things to people. Like I thought if I tell this, I'm going to get sent to a hospital again, or if I show up with this, they're going to like throw me away like I'm a schizo. And so I didn't feel safe unpacking myself with a traditional therapist or doctor. And so I became a coach because I realized like when we work with each other one on one and somebody who actually can receive and interpret that type of information and reframe it, it's more powerful than like anything else that you can experience as a human. Like the connections, the grief and the community and the connection and the personal growth that we have together is unparalleled to any other healing modality I experienced personally. So I'm a coach now, and like what I do, I sometimes I feel like I'm more of a consultant. It just depends on who it is I'm working with. But coaching is about asking good questions, and it's about listening to people and then pivoting and hearing pieces of what they say and like helping them actually realize their own answers and like access their own intuition. Like I want to like help people remember how to come home to themselves and to like remember they have their own inner wisdom. They have the medicine for themselves and for other people through their stories, and how they decide to think about their story. How you decide to believe about yourself ultimately frames the rest of your life and how you show up in the world, how you show up in personal relationships and as a parent, as a mother, as a father. Like we have so much power that we are not even aware of. But once we have that recognition and the light goes on, it's like I see like a collective healing here on the planet as we start telling our stories in an empowered way.
Yes, absolutely. That's how I felt too, just like it's so bizarre how far we've gotten from that like the reasons why, for example, like a lot of movies are made after, let's just say, really rich people or CEOs, like we focus so much on these like really unattainable type things that like really don't lead to happiness. We glorify money and material things and yachts and mansions and nice cars. And those are the types of people that are normally featured on, say, a podcast or in a movie. It's like we glorify that. And I think it makes people feel really alone because that can sometimes be so far from where somebody is and where most people are that it puts them into another hole where they're like, well, I guess I'm not normal. Like, that's what's normal. That's what's mainstream is everybody's focusing on this. And like, that's not my life. Like, my life is really dark. I have these really dark thoughts. I've had a really dark past, and being able to share, like you said, to feel safe, because that's been like a huge thing on my podcast too, where survivors go and they're gaslit at their therapist or the doctor. They're given wrong
Mm-hmm.
diagnoses. They're just given a prescription. They're admitted to a psychiatric ward or worse. And you realize that there's such a lack of spirituality, of understanding of deep trauma. I mean, Bruce Lipton, biology of belief, like you said,
Mm-hmm.
it's like taking our power back. Like we've had so much information about ourselves suppressed that like we don't talk about, our ability to change our body, like our literal DNA, like we can change through creating, how you said, like a different habit, you know,
Yeah.
learning something like NLP. Like I took a course too, and I've had people be really mean about it. And I'm like, we all need to learn this. Like I was a victim of watching the news and listening to politicians and celebrities and like advertisements. And when I actually learned what NLP was, I see it everywhere. And I'm like, gosh, I've
Mm-hmm.
been so manipulated my whole life. Like everybody should at least know what it is,
Mm-hmm.
and there's just so many things that have just been so suppressed from us that like we're in this low frequency, and we're
Yeah.
constantly pushed back into it. And instead of being able to recognize like what's outside of us, see it for what it is and be able to like create a boundary through it, a healthy boundary, just like how we would in a relationship. There's all this toxicity coming at us that's invisible, and we're just letting it in because we're not aware it's there. And I feel like what your work does is it helps people again turn on, it puts that light bulb on and helps them see who they are and what's around them, so that way they can use the reality around them and what's within them and be able to walk through the world confidently with boundaries, with being able to see dangers or threats, and then also being able to stand strong and, be a survivor instead of a victim.
Yeah, that's well said. That is exactly what we're doing. It's just so cool right now because there's like different realities playing out right now at the same time, and where it depends on where you're looking. Like if you're seeing like the fall of man right now and the country in shambles, then that's the reality you're going to experience. But the one that I can acknowledge that that's happening in one respect, but I also see a greater picture unfolding right now in the midst of all this chaos. I see us, um, Americans, we'll just start with the Americans, and can only speak for that because I'm an American, but we are waking up and more of us are turning on that light and of remembrance, and we're remembering like who we are, and we're actually coming together. And I really do believe that it's going to take an army of neurodivergent people to come together and share their experience, strength, and hope to really activate like it may be a small army, not even a big one, just a little army even. It will turn on this light for the rest of the people here because we have been under mass hypnosis, as you said, like with the news. And when you study NLP, it's like super easy to identify all the ways you're being framed and commanded to do things. And it's kind of like that movie, like They Live, where the guy has the glasses on and he can take them and see what the actual messages are. And but like, we're in a time now where what was once considered crazy or called crazy or dismissed is no longer being dismissed. Like people are hearing each other and they're starting to activate like the light bulb of like, well, maybe I should look into this a little bit further. And it's no longer like a frightening. I just want to encourage whoever's listening to like, we are now in a timeline where it is safe for you to come out and share your story. Where, you may have been targeted before or felt like you were gang stalked or had like, a feeling of fear around sharing your story. This is the time that we need you. This is the time that you are welcome to come forward and that you are safer than ever to share your story because we are doing this together. It's a collective action.
Amen, girl. Amen. And speaking of, this is your first time coming on and sharing. Talk about just what inspired you to want to come forward and share your story in a long form, like a long format interview.
Um, well, I really appreciate you offering me to come on too. I've always known that I was going to have to do this. Like this was part of my journey is like I'm gonna have to do like a disclosure and like actually tell people like who I am and what I've been through. Because a lot of people only know parts of me. They know like little pieces of Katie, or some people know me as a coach and as a writer, and some people know me as like a former shambler. Um, but like I just thought this is important now because after that gate post went viral, I mean, there's almost 1 million people that have seen it now, and
Wow.
thousands of people have commented and written to me and shared their stories to me. And it was like the first time in their life that the light went on and they were like, oh, I have something to share. I realized like it's not about me, it's about us. It's about like I have to do my part. I have to share who I am and I have to come forward so that I can like make a gateway like open for someone else to come through. Like I need to be like present for this time in history that we're in right now because this is this is more than like an awakening. This is the great, unraveling of everything that's happened and everything that we were. And it's time to bridge who we are and move forward from like being victims to being victors in this life and in United States as far as like whatever our future is. I believe that we the people, have the power to change the tide. And it just begins with each of us having the courage to come forth and show ourselves
Oh,
authentically.
I love that. Can I read you a quote that I actually
Yeah.
posted on Twitter, but when I posted it and when I saw it, it reminded me of you. I stole it.
Okay.
This isn't mine, but I quoted it. And the quote is, if you want to know where to find your contribution to the world, look at your wounds. when you learn how to heal them, teach others.
Oh, I love that. That's definitely
I was like, that is Katie all the way, but it can be
all the way.
anybody, like what a purpose to be able to be like, gosh, I had all these years of things that just seemed like hell or they didn't make sense. I felt so lost. I felt like I didn't belong. But I'm going to gather all those years together. I'm going to heal from them. And then I'm going to give the gift of hopefully accelerating somebody else's healing or preventing them from being hurt by sharing my story and giving them tools, just like how we would, to me, like a lot of this is very similar to, say, going and learning, taking a course in school. Like this learning, it doesn't happen overnight. But when you invest in it, like it really does change your life and you can really turn things around, But it's like, I feel like survivors, especially, have just this beautiful responsibility that was anointed to them, where it's like, okay, you guys know the secrets to healing that most of society doesn't. And the rest of society's in this low vibration. They're traumatized. They don't know what happened to them. They're not even aware of mind control. Your job is to heal from all the bullshit that you went through and then to go show other people how to help heal what they don't even know is wrong with them, and to help like accelerate that process. And like some of the cool things that I'm seeing that you might be too is like younger and younger survivors, like you, for example. Like a lot of the people on my show, like there's not a lot of the people that were whistleblowing and coming forward, decades ago were a lot older. Kathy O'Brien being an anomaly, she was so young when she first started whistleblowing, but a lot of the survivors that, first came out were a lot older, 50s, 60s, 70s. And I'm seeing now younger survivors waking up and healing to the point where like they're 25 and coming on my show and having these very articulate conversations about what happened to them. And it's like, oh my gosh, 20s, 30s, 40s, like a lot younger people now are finding people like you, Kathy O'Brien, and they're able to learn easier than they were decades ago. And their healing process is accelerating. And I think that's possible for all of society
Mhm.
through work like yours and others and people coming forward and sharing what you went through. Like you said, the testimonies, it's just, oh, the testimonies are so powerful, and it's like such a missing link, We're so focused on like that picture perfect. I can't show up without makeup or without a filter or without, posing in the perfect way and having the perfect caption, and it's like that's not life. Even the person that posts it, that they're, some of the most people that look the happiest on social media are probably some of the most miserable. And I
Yeah.
love like just having like these authentic conversations where we can sit here like friends, like being emotional, talking about hard things, and we're not trying to like cover that up. We're not like putting on a fake persona to come on and talk to each other. Like we can just talk like real people again and like bring back actual conversations that are like meaningful and don't just feel devoid and empty.
Yeah, 100%. I was gonna say too, like one of the things I just want to encourage anyone who's listening to is like if someone is listening to this and feels like they've lost like a sense of purpose or that they maybe haven't like they feel like a waste of talent. I've seen a lot of comments like that. They feel like their life has no meaning or like their talent is wasted. I just want to encourage whoever feels that way right now to know that this right now is your time. Maybe your whole life you've been waiting for this time. And if you resonate with any of this, like you're needed right now and you've been prepared for this place and time. So all the time that you've been sitting back and, felt like your life has been not very much or you haven't accomplished anything, we need you now. Like this is the moment. Like everything about your story, everything about your experience is relevant. It hasn't been a waste, and you may have the medicine that someone else needs right now.
I love that. What a beautiful message. And that's what like these testimonies too, it's like hearing the hope within them, restoring that with people and showing people where you can go from suffering to, having a good quality of life and experiencing happiness and joy and not being on a million medications. Thank you, Katie, for giving so many people hope and for sharing your vulnerabilities today. It means so much to me. And I want to share with people where you're at on social media, but before we do that, is there anything that we didn't cover today about your story? Anything else that you wanted people to know that I didn't ask about or that you didn't get to share yet?
Sure. Well, I just wanted to say, I am a life coach, and right now, like, I have decided that I'm only working with women. Sorry, guys, but I'm transitioning to only working with women right now because I think that like there's just women need women in recovery and men need men. and my husband's actually like a recovery coach for men. Um,
Oh my
so
God.
like, yeah, like the work we do, it kind of parallels each other, but I just didn't wanted to like put it out there that if someone wants to share their story, or if they heard something that they'd like to work through today, that they can send me an email. You can like share that at the end if you'd like, and then we can go from there. Um, and then like when we're done, I kind of wanted to close out on another poem that came to me that I remembered. It was called Clarity. And I thought
Yes.
it would be a good way to end this.
Yes, let's
Uh,
do it. You can bring it up, but before we do that, did you want to share your email? I'll write it in the show notes. Did you want to share it? And then
yeah.
you can share your social media handles too in just a second.
Oh yeah. My email is intuitiveintervention@proton.me.
Intuitive
And
intervention at proton.me.
yeah, intuitiveintervention@proton.me. It's on my TikTok bio as well.
Okay, let's
and my
let's
t
take a look at these.
yeah.
We'll go to your TikTok. Yep, so there was the gate video right here, almost a million. That's amazing. And that was the post that I was introduced to you through. And I was like, oh my gosh, somebody else on here gets it. But
It's
your
so
name on
funny.
here is Katie. Is it I always get mixed up whenever I'm looking at profiles. Is your handle Katie.Navi or is it unfiltered Katie Lady? I forget. I think it's
Um,
Katie.Navi, right?
It's Kate. Yeah, it's just under Kate.Navi,
Dot Navi.
at Kate, Kate dot N-A, V as in victory, I, Navi.
And this is sort of the platform where you are currently, I guess, the most active, right? You just started a Twitter and I know you're on a couple other social media, but this is kind of where you're most active currently, right?
Yeah, I just got on TikTok recently, and like I'm kind of feeling like that's where I prefer to be social media wise. I also am just now on X. Like I have literally just started a profile
Yay.
there. So I'm a noob on X, but you guys can reach out to me on Twitter X if you'd like as well, but I don't know my way around as well there yet. Um, and that's at Katie underscore Navi on Twitter. But I was gonna say like uh yeah, I'm talking to a lot more people on TikTok these days because I've noticed it's not gated. I started out on Instagram. I actually have like way more on Instagram like content that I did, but it started gating me when I became like a truth teller in 2020. So I don't really go anywhere. My following kind of like moves around, and there's like it seems like my content doesn't go anywhere on Instagram either. So kind of
Same.
just like leave it alone now. Instagram's controlled by Meta, and Meta doesn't like truth tellers. So,
There you go. I'm kind
you
of the
know.
same. I used to be on Instagram all the time and now I'm like everywhere else but Instagram.
Yeah, but I found that the TikTok community, I actually have found a lot of really good people here, really authentic people. I haven't really found any trolls, knock on wood. Like it's been really surprising to me, especially with this type of content and disclosure, how many people are like just so candid and authentic and like curious, and there isn't a lot of heckling or trolling that I've seen. So I really think that's cool. There's like real people out there having like real discussions now. And it's not as like suppressed as it is in other social media sectors. So I like that.
And I like too that you can take a video format and put a really compelling message in a short way and allow for people it appeals to more senses, I think, because it has the captions so people can have the volume off and they can read if that's sort of their learning style. They can listen, but they can also see you. So to me, it's almost like a spin-off of podcasts in a sense where you can kind of get messages out in a quick and efficient way and then sort of lead people. Like I love your gate video. It gave so many breadcrumbs. Like you didn't just sort of like dump all this on people. Like you presented it in a way where it made people internalize it and like think, you know? And I love like your TikTok's awesome. I love all your content on it. And, you know, I'm excited that you're doing more of like the video format stuff. You're very articulate. You're very good at taking an idea and making it palatable and sort of bite-sizing it for people. And you also have a lot of different stuff on here that people can learn from. So I just want to thank you so much. I love what you're doing. And The survivor community is awesome on Twitter too. I know that you're a little bit newer to it, but I think that it'll help bridge some other gaps with people that aren't on TikTok. It seems like people are either like on TikTok or like on Twitter right now, and there's like great survivor communities on both. So I'm really excited that you are on X now or Twitter, whatever you want to call it. But your TikTok is just awesome. So I'm going to have all of your links below for people. I'll have your email below. Again, she's only working with women, so if you want to email her, and obviously people, if they want to email you, I would say if you guys have more information on Gate too that you want to share, like go email Katie or go comment on her Gate video, your story or kind of your info too, because that's another thing I think that we're sort of, exploring a little bit more and talking about. Um, did you have anything else that you wanted to add about your social media or about anything online or where people can find you?
Well, I'm kind of like showing up now and getting used to like being present now on social media a little bit more. And we'll be starting a podcast sometime in April as
Woo!
well.
Any
So,
teasers on that?
huh?
Any teasers?
It's called Candidly Coded, and it's going to be kind of like a oh, we'll be talking about things maybe in we'll be bridging a lot of different topics together. So I want to say that it's going to be like one part disclosure and another part like it's a little bit more fun and like where are we going with this, kind of like it's like for the I would say it's like going to be designed for the second group of gay kids, like the ones that think that they're here to help with the new rebuild that we're working on right now, which is like we're like the truth tellers that are changing the tide. And so I don't we'll see where it goes. I have a few ideas, but I'm gonna let it evolve itself. And I'm working with another woman on this as well. So it'll be kind of fun.
That's exciting. That's exactly
Yeah.
what you should do. You're so good at
Yeah.
explaining stuff. You're so good at talking about all of this and articulating it. You're very eloquent whenever you speak. You're brilliant. Brilliant, beautiful, and you have such important experiences and lessons from them that the world needs to learn. So I am so grateful that you decided to go public. Even if it wasn't with your testimony, I love that you're just online, and I'm even more proud of you for sharing your testimony. It's a little bit easier sometimes. I always feel weird when like I'm on a podcast and somebody else is hosting. Like it's different talking about yourself than it is listening, but it's important, to be authentic and to come out in the world and to share. So amazing job today. I would have thought you were out there telling your testimony for years.
Oh,
Um,
thanks.
Crushed it and you did amazing, and offered so much value. And you have turned, I know people watching, like you turned on a lot of lights today, including mine. You definitely bring a light into my life. I'm so honored that I get to share this space with you. I'm honored that you chose this podcast to disclose your own incredible testimony. And I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for everything that you do for others and for survivors.
Oh, thank you, Emma. I appreciate you too. Thank you so much for the work you do. So I just wanted to close out, I guess, on another poem because I just think it's fitting, and it's called Clarity. Let's see if I remember it off the top of my head. Okay.
Let's do it.
We all face unique challenges. Our choices sow the fabric of our morals. These words I speak are more to seek clarity within the id and ego quarrels. So I encourage you, dear listener, to bring unfiltered reservations, knowing you don't have to agree with me, as I also have hesitation. Please recognize that in these words, I lay myself before you, and it was never my intention to dance with indiscretion. However, sometimes we must go to dark places to find our inner light. If what I said provokes or pokes a feeling, then I've done my job right.
And on that note, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for tuning in. God bless you, and we will see you next time.